didn't see it then. I was moving reckless, almost lost myself, chasing wrong directions. But I made it out, and I can't ignore it. Looking back now, I know God was watching. Yeah. 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 I was walking through life with no real plan, just doing what I felt, never thinking ahead. Caught up in things I shouldn't have been, going places I knew I shouldn't step in, and I knew it deep inside. But I kept going, I ain't question why. Thought I had control, thought I knew the way, but I was getting closer to a darker place. And it's crazy, looking back now, how I made it through when I should have been down. How I walked away from things that could have changed me, from moments that could have really rearranged me. I didn't see it then, I was moving reckless, almost lost myself, chasing wrong directions. Yeah. But I made it out, and I can't ignore it. Yeah. Looking back now, I know God was watching. Yeah. Now I see it clearer than I did before. There was something there when I thought I was alone. Every close call, every narrow escape, every wrong turn that didn't seal my fate, that was grace. I ain't see it then. Thought it was luck, thought it was just events, but it's deeper than that. I can't deny there's a reason I'm here, there's a reason I survived and I feel it. And everything, every second chance that life will bring. Every time I almost lost my way, something pulled me back I can't explain. And I'm thankful, even for the pain, cause it showed me I was never just alone in this game. And now I move different, now I understand there was always something guiding me through every plan. I didn't see it then, I was moving reckless, almost lost myself, chasing wrong directions. But I made it out, and I can't ignore it. Looking back now, I know God was watching. Yeah. He was there. He was there. Didn't see it then. I didn't see it then. I was moving reckless, almost lost myself, chasing wrong directions. But I made it out, and I can't ignore me. Looking back now, I know God was watching. Yeah. I was walking through life with no real plan, just doing what I felt, never thinking ahead. Caught up in things I shouldn't have been, going places I knew I shouldn't step in, and I knew it deep inside. But I kept going, I ain't questioning why. Thought I had control, thought I knew the way, but I was getting closer to a darker place, and it's crazy. Looking back now, how I made it through when I should have been down. How I walked away from things that could have changed me, from moments that could have really rearranged me. I didn't see it then. I was moving reckless, almost lost myself, chasing wrong directions. But I made it out, and I can't ignore it. Looking back now, I know God was watching. Yeah. Now I see it clearer than I did before. There was something there when I thought I was alone. Every close call, every narrow escape, every wrong turn that didn't seal my fate. That was grace, I ain't see it then. Thought it was love, thought it was just events, but it's deeper than that, I can't deny. There's a reason I'm here, there's a reason I survived, and I feel it in everything. Every second chance that life would bring. Every time I almost lost my way, something pulled me back, I can't explain. And I'm thankful, even for the pain, cause it showed me I was never just alone in this game. And now I move different, now I understand. There was always something guiding me through every plan. I didn't see it then. I was moving reckless, almost lost myself, chasing wrong directions. But I made it out, and I can't ignore it. Looking back now, I know God was watching. Yeah, you was there. You was there, you was there, you was there. You was there, you was there, you was there. You was there.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. I am King Clifford Jefferson, descendant of Godfrey the Fifth Caravan Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. It is June 25, 2026, which is equivalent to the birth year 2976. I greet you in the name of all the ancestors who have come and gone before me. I greet you in the name of all officers and staff, members, wannabe members, students, trustees, as well as all those who are heirs of this illustrious estate that has been preserved by our ancestors through that corporate office known modernly as a corporation. So, you know it as a legal fiction, legal entity. Some prefer to call it a straw man, but nevertheless, it was created by our ancestors. And with that, we'll get started with this marvelous lecture. Thank you, J. Cole, for that marvelous sermon. How many of you are, based upon the lyrics of that song, are living a life, coming and going, not understanding where you truly are? Okay? This is the purpose of what this lesson is about. So bear with me. Give me a couple of seconds. Let me get set up. All right, this is going to be a good one. The title, 1 BC to 1 AD, the story behind it all. 1 BC to 1 AD, the story behind it all. Once again, like, share, subscribe, donate free and common sockets to $ Clifford Jefferson L. Once again, I did a couple of videos on TikTok, but I don't like it. I don't like TikTok. I prefer to use YouTube. Once again, I'm not in here for pats on the back, nor am I here for to gain followers. You know what you want to follow, and you follow what your heart's desire. And if your heart desire is not in this capacity, then I don't need you to follow me. Okay, so with that being said, this is strictly for those who are descendants of the English crown, whether they're descendants from Ireland, Scotland, England and under the terms of what we were called at that particular time, and even going back through time immemorial, it remains the same. You're protected based upon the preserved law, which we call time immemorial, where memory stops and legal memory begins. So with that, let's get started with this marvelous lecture. 1 BC to 1 AD, the story behind it all. If there's any comments, please post them. And it's very important so I can ask all questions. This might be a long one, too. Okay, let's get started. From 1 BC to 1 AD. Okay? The story behind it all. Why were the calendar points or milestones set at 1 BC to 1 AD? BC meaning before the incarnation of Christ, and AD means in the year of our Lord. All happening within the world, which is based upon AM, Anno Mundo, which means the creation of the world. So it's very important to understand what those two terms mean, AD and BC. Okay, we know BC is before the incarnation of Christ or before the creation of Christianity. Okay, and we understand Christianity are those who follow Christ. We understand Christ lived anywhere between 1 AD and 30 AD. Okay, and as a result of that climax, it brought us to what we call the apostate age. Okay, the apostate age, or what we call the age of the council of the apostles. Okay, the age of the council of apostles happened between 30 to 100 AD, which brings us to the apostate fathers and their apologist letters that they wrote on behalf of the inflictions and the persecutions that the children or the Israelites or the now called Christians were subject to, which occurred from a point of 48, what was it? I would say from 48 AD to about 311 AD. Okay, yes, the persecution of the Christians happened anywhere from 48 AD to about 311 until Constantine came upon the scene and established through the Edict of Milan that Christianity needs to be protected. Okay, and that was through the Council of Nicene. Okay, we're going to talk about all that today. So if there's any questions, please post them in the chat. Give me 1 second. Please post them in the chat if you can. Okay, I don't see a comment box, so I won't be able to see it. All right, let's see. Everyone. that. Greetings to you all. Any questions, please post them in the chat. Okay, please post them in the chat. All right. All right. Now, what we need to first understand in regards to understanding the story behind the purpose of 1 BC and 1 AD is to really understand that this is based upon the Gregorian calendar. Okay, we know the Gregorian calendar was created by Pope Gregory XV in 1582. Okay, but yet the application of 1 AD is being utilized as a milestone or an anchoring point for the preservation of the history of the people identified at that particular time in the area or geographical location in regards to the history and story that's determined by the calendar. As I always say, he who writes your books sets your timeline. Time never was when we were not. If the life of time begins, the time will come when we are no more or will be no more. Okay? So it's very important to understand 1 AD to us mathematically equals the year 951. Okay? In the Berber calendar. They call them Amazigh, but we refer to ourselves as Berbers. Okay? But based upon the calendar, 1 AD in the Berber calendar is mathematically 951. If we were in 1 BC, the year would be 950 BC. So it went from 950 BC to 951 AD, and that's based upon the institution or the recognizing of the Berber calendar that was done in 1980. Okay, which brings us, or which was recognized as a milestone or anchor point, going all the way back to the biblical story dealing with the King Shoshin. Okay, from the king, the 22nd king of Egypt, Shoshin. Okay, a Libyan Berber. Okay. This is very, very, very important because to qualify our existence as Berbers today, we need to be able to chronologically trace ourselves back all the way through what we call time immemorial, time out of mind. And we can just do that by basic mathematics, okay? By basic mathematics. Let's just see. Basic mathematics. You're in the Gregorian year, which the year would be 2026. All right? Let me plug in my computer before it goes dead. Hold on. So if you look at mathematically, the year for us is 29, which is the which is equivalent to the Gregorian year, which was created by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582. The year would be 2026. Okay? So if you the Berber year is 950 years older than the Gregorian year that you're using today. If you subtract 2026 from 2976, it will equal the year 950. Okay? And this 950 will be the year 950 BC. Not AD, BC. Because there is no year zero. From 950, when they started counting from 1 BC to 1 AD, okay, there's no year zero. It's very important to understand there is no year zero. All right. So if you subtract 2026 from the year 2976, it will bring you to what we call the year 950 BC, which would be equivalent to the year 1 BC. Okay. It would be equivalent to the year 1 BC. Very, very important to understand the mathematics that aligns with this. All right. One AD is mathematically 951 in the Berber or Amazigh calendar. The formula is a straightforward because the modern standardized Berber calendar is pegged precisely at the year 950 years ahead of the Gregorian calendar timeline. Okay? Very important. To convert any Gregorian calendar year to the Berber year, you just simply add 950 plus 1 would be the year 951. Okay? If it was the Hebrew calendar and 1 AD in the Gregorian year would be the year 3671. Parts of it was the year 1 BC in the Gregorian calendar, and it was the year 950 in the Berber calendar. The Hebrew year would be 3760 in the Hebrew calendar. So everyone chose a specific calendar for their specific people to anchor themselves in what we call history. We know AD is going forward, and we know BC is going backwards. Okay? Okay, going backwards. You can't go forwards if you don't understand backwards. You can't know your future until you understand your past. Okay? And AD, if you're moving from AD, then you don't understand your past, because when it was created by Dionysius Eusebius in 525, he only thought of it going forward, which we'll discuss later on in this lecture. And when we did with BC, that wasn't created the damn near 300 years later to what we call Venerian, what was his name? Bede, okay? Who created BC? Let's get into it. Why the year 950? Why the year 950? The calendar starting point was set by Algerian scholar Ammar Nagadi in the Berber Academy in Paris during the late 20th century. Okay, 20th century. This Ammar Nagadi chose the year 950 BC. Okay, he chose this. All right, pretty much what Venerable Bede did when he created the word BC. Okay, this is 1,000 years later. Okay, 1,000 years later. Algerian scholar Ammar Nagadi is tracing the Berber history, which they now call Amazigh, because of the adoption of the Berber culture by people who are not Berbers, i.e., based upon the aberration of colored skin, because we know they are the swarthy people. All right, we know that he chose 950 BC to anchor the calendar to a prominent milestone in the Berber history, not Amazigh, but the Berber history. But for the sake of the lesson, we're going to include Amazigh. The approximate year that the Libyan Berber king Shoshin ascended to the throne as pharaoh of the what they call Berber king. They were not Egyptian, but for the sake of the lesson, we call them the pharaoh of Egypt, founded in the 22nd dynasty. Okay? How many of you know that much history? Okay? By establishing this timeline, 1 AD aligns with the 951 first year of the following Shoshin rise to power. Okay? So from 950 to 951, which is the rise of a Berber king known as Shoshin, which is mentioned in your Bible, is also written by, is spoken about by Venerable Bede, okay, who created BC, okay? Not Dionysius Eusebius, who created AD, Annus Dominius, okay, in the year of our Lord. All right? So the Gregorian 1 BC, right, is actually in the Berber year 950, based upon the calendar. And as I said earlier, the year 3760 is the Hebrew year calendar. So we know we have AD, BC, and AM. Okay, so these are two terms that we need to understand. Anno Mundo means in the year of the world. Okay? So it says, because neither calendar uses BC for its own tracking, the number represents years elapsed from their respective starting eras, i.e. epoch. Okay? So for the Gregorians, under the Gregorian calendar, all right, which is for modern day people because you use it today, all right, the year 1 BC, right, would be in the Berber year, the year 950 BC. Okay? And then for the Hebrews, it would be the year 3760 in the Hebrew calendar, all existing simultaneously at the same exact time. Okay? How many of you can comprehend that? Clarifying the terminology. Let's clarify it. Okay? The Berber calendar, it counts forward from 950 BC. Okay? From 950 BC, short of 1,000 years. Therefore, the year 1 BC in the Gregorian year is the Berber year 950 BC, not 1,950 years ago. All right, we'll take you back to the actual current year of the historical biblical story, going back to Shoshin. Okay, it's just symbolic of why the Algerian who backdated or who instituted or embedded or anchored the Berber calendar so it be recognized historically as it is presently, okay, by the Berber calendar, that it will backdate, symbolically representing the time when a Berber king actually came to reign here on earth, okay, in a particular geographical location known as Egypt, all right? So the Hebrew calendar, it uses the word Am for Anno Mundi, which means the year of the world. Not 1 BC, not 1 AD, but Anno Mundi, meaning the year of the world. It counts forward from 3760 to 3761 BC. Therefore, the year 1 BC and the Hebrew year is 3760 AM. Okay? The year 3760 AM. Very, very important to understand that. Point 2, step-by-step math. Because there is no year zero, when transitioning from BC to AD, the math shifts slightly compared to standard additions. So another example, Berber transition step. 1 AD equals the Berber year 951, okay, which makes the Berber year or the Berber calendar of the Berber existence 950 years longer than those who existed as a result of the Gregorian calendar by inserting the year 1 AD, and that don't start till 525 AD by Dionysius Exiguus, okay? At the same time, the Berber calendar existed in 1 AD. The Hebrew calendar is existing in AM, okay, meaning the year of the world. 1 AD corresponds to the Hebrew civil year 3761 AM, which begins the autumn of 1 BC. So from 1 BC to 1 AD in the Hebrew calendar is the year 3760 AM to the year 3761 AM, and the year of the world. Okay, very, very, very important. Operating simultaneously on the same timeline. Okay? On the same timeline. So let's see the alignment comparison. On the Gregorian year, the year will be 2 BC. So while it's 2 BC, the year 2 BC, and the Gregorian year, the Berber year will be the year 949 BC. Okay? Simultaneously, for the Hebrews, the year will be 3759 AM in the year of the world. Very important. The year AD, the year AM, and the year BC, or the term BC, were created for specific purposes. Okay? Which you do not yet understand. So the year 2 BC, and the Berber year will be 949, and for the Hebrew, the year will be 3759 AM. Okay? This goes all the way back to the creation of the world. So while the world is being created, the Berbers is here, but those who follow the Gregorian calendar ain't even in existence. Okay? Very important. We know from BC you're going down. So from 2 BC, you got 1 BC, okay? And from 1 BC, the year is 1 BC for the Gregorian year, for the Berber year will be the year 950, which in the Hebrew year will be the year 3760 AM, in the year of the world. Going down, based upon the year 0, the next year will be 1 AD, because you will go from 1 BC to 1 AD, moving forward, not backwards, moving forward, all right? So the year 1 AD, and the Berber year will be the year 951 AD, in the year of our Lord, okay? In which for the Hebrew year will be the year 3761 AM, in the year of the world, okay? Going on forward, the year 2 AD in the Gregorian calendar will be the year 952 in the Berber calendar, and in the Hebrew calendar, the year will be 3762 AM. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to anyone? So a correct summary would be, in the context of historical timeline, the year 1 BC the year 1 BC directly equals the Berber year 950 and the Hebrew year 3760 AM, Anno Mundi, in the year of the world. Okay? So now we can say it's safe to say that, so the Hebrews use the year 37 AD to anchor themselves into the history, just like the modern world used the Gregorian calendar 1 AD to anchor themselves into history, and just like the Berbers did in 951 AD to anchor themselves into history, and that was in 1980, which is recognized, just as William the Conqueror did in 1066, okay? They anchored himself as an English feudal king, okay? Based upon the years of a king reigning, okay? All of them are using time immemorial times or ancient times to anchor themselves into history, and this is the very reason why the concept of time immemorial 1189 was created by our ancestor, King Richard I. The very reason why. What have we done? What have we done? We perfectly, or I should say, have perfectly captured how different civilizations, cultures, and legal systems anchor themselves into time to establish their own historical or legal reality. Did you hear that? I have just perfectly captured how the Hebrews, the Berbers, and every other nation who has a calendar, okay? They all exist on the same timeline. What this timeline does for different civilizations, cultures, and their legal system, it anchors themselves into time to establish their own historical and legal realities. Each of these examples represent a unique historical anchor point chosen to create order, legitimacy, or a sense of legal, what they want to say the word, continuity. Continuity. Who is being taught like this? Now I can't be concerned about everybody else. They need to know their own teachings. But for the sake of the lesson, I'm going to deal with 4 historical anchors compared. Okay, and compare them all the same based upon the same timeline. First, let's take the Hebrews. First, let's go here. Year 6000. Year. All right, 6,000 years. This article is about the year 6,000 and what? The Hebrew calendar. Okay? The Hebrew calendar. Part of a series of eschatology from the Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, Islamics, Jews, North, Taoist, Zoroastrian, and interreligious groups. Okay? Very, very important that you understand this. The Hebrew calendar, the Hebrew year, 6,000 marks according to the classical rabbinical Jewish sources. These are dealing with canonists, all right? Those who write the law. The latest time for the initiation of the what? Masonic age. The Talmud, the Midrash, the Zohar specifically specified that the date by which the Messiah will appear is 6,000 years from creation. So if creation started in the year 3761, then 6,000 years from 3761 will be the year 2026. Because 3761 and the Gregorian year or Gregorian calendar will be the year 1 AD for those who follow the Gregorian calendar. And for the Berber year, it would be the year 951. And for the Hebrews, it will be the year 3761, which exists on the time chart or the timeline at the same exact time. So if you look at the Hebrew year, parts of the Gregorian year, 2026, which in the Berber year will be the year 2976. If you look, the Hebrew year will be the year 55786. That's what year it is for the Hebrews. The year 5786. For us, it's 2976. And for those who follow the Gregorian calendar, the year is currently 2026. Does that make sense for all those who want to understand, are they living their true story? All right, let's see why. You can't even talk about the events that's going on until if you can verify if the story actually happened. Okay? Because majority don't even, who claim to be Christians don't go by the Hebrew calendar. You don't even use your Hebrew calendar. Very important to set your timeline. For historical anchor compares the Hebrews calendar 3761 BC, the year of the world. This anchors the entire calendar to the cosmic creation. You hear that? The cosmic creation, Anu Mundi, based on traditional rabbinic calculations of the biblical text. AD ain't even been invented yet. Okay? It provides a spiritual, not secular. So this is a cosmic creation that the Hebrew calendar was created to validate cosmic creation based upon the year of the world, not you. The year of the world. It provides a spiritual and unified timeline for Jewish history and religious observance independent of changing empire. When we say empire, we're talking about what's going down here on earth. Okay? Very important. So we already understand that the Hebrew calendar deals with what? Cosmic creation. Everything that's spiritual, things that you cannot see. Okay? This is when God is in play. Okay? A God that has no eyes, no ears, no hands, etc. He ain't got a tool belt around his belt, going out on a 24-hour job building creation. No, this is not happening. Okay? For that, you need the ancient world, and the ancient world, based upon history, memory, belief, okay, needs to be validated chronologically going backwards. Not forwards, but backwards, okay? So you can't use the modern Gregorian calendar for that, because that calendar goes what? Forward. And when they created the calendar under the Gregorian calendar, that goes all the way back to the Gregorian mission that was done by Augustine of Canterbury, going all the way back to the Council of Nicene, which was to establish Christianity as a national and international religion, and that was only based upon Roman Catholicism. Okay? Had nothing to do with Christianity and how we practiced it, going back how we set it up in our church. Okay? And I'm going to explain that today. The modern world, Gregorian 1 AD, this anchors global time to the theological events that's happening in the Hebrew Bible. Okay? The estimated birth year of Jesus Christ, which is 1 AD, Annos Dominios, okay, calculated by 6th century monks named Dionysius Exiguus. Okay? Today it serves as a universal baseline for modern international commerce, politics, and communication. So the Gregorian calendar only serves as a baseline for international commerce, politics, and communication based upon the theological events, which we know is events that happen with the church, and we know things happen with the church are relative to God, which takes you back to the historical history, going back to the Hebrew creation of what? The Word, okay? Which exists on the same timeline at the same exact time. Okay, so we didn't dealt with the Hebrew Bible, which is a cosmic book. Okay, now we have based upon the calendar. Now we're dealing with the modern calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar that deals with things that apply to people. Okay, people interaction with government, politics, commerce, international. So you mean to tell me in 1 AD this is what they're dealing with? And if this is what they're dealing with, this is secular. This is not spiritual like they talk about in the Hebrew Bible. Okay, so if that is in fact the case, I see why Shoshin had came back under God's authority to teach the children of God that they had abandoned God's law. Okay, because we're reading the law that are created by the canons. The canons are the ones who wrote the ecclesiastical and canon law. Now we have the Berber calendar. The Berber calendar, 950 to 951 BC to 950 BC to 951 AD. This anchors the Amazigh or Berbers, when we say Berbers, identity to a moment of political, cultural triumphs. Okay, very, very important to understand that because we know for the Berbers 951, and it was based upon political and cultural triumphs, and that fits right into the Gregorian era that deals with baseline modern international commerce, politics, and communication, all going back or rooted in the Hebrew Bible that was a gift given to God from us based upon our existence here in a secular world doing secular things. Okay? All right? And that was locked in all the way up till 1066. Okay? When William the Conqueror invaded and started the English Regnite years for people who wasn't even English. He was a feudal king of Frankish Nordic descent. Okay? Nonetheless, he established the brilliant legal distinction between English common law. Okay? So we can see in 1066, the coronation of William the Conqueror. The coronation of William the Conqueror anchors the legal continuity of the English monarchy. Mind you, in 1065 there is no English monarchy here because they didn't classify themselves as English based upon renowned years of a king until William the Conqueror established that, and we're going to explain it later on in this lesson. All English legal reigns are calculated by how many years a specific king or queen has been on the throne. Okay, so this was done by the English Regnite instituted by William the Conqueror. Prior to that, when English kings were sitting on the throne, they didn't need to calculate it because it wasn't calculated based off that. They calculated based upon Anu Mundi in the year of our Lord, AD. Okay, they did it in AD. Very important. That then was locked in by the coronation of Richard I of the Plantagenet crown, which you see here, all right, by Richard I, which is specifically chosen by Parliament in 1275. Okay, so this was done over how long? About close to 200 years after Parliament of 1275 defined the term time immemorial, which means time at a mind. In British law, if a custom land claim or right has existed continuously since 1189, is legally considered to have existed forever, and no one can challenge its origin. You see that? So we're protected based upon what was happening on the land, all right, in 1189, and we know that was done by the English kings, whether they were de facto or de jure, okay, in regards to a preservation of continuity of rights that go back to, that are anchored into what we got God. Because we know when we deal with the church, the Roman Catholic Church and the English Church, you have to understand what churches represented the Roman Catholic Church and the English Church. And for that, we need to wait until I get there. Okay? So bear with me. So let's look at the summary of tables which anchors each nation's by way of their calendar. Okay? Specifically the aforementioned. Hold that thought. Okay. So a summary of tables with anchors, the Hebrews, the Berbers, as well as everyone else. Okay? We know the Hebrew calendar, all right? The Hebrew calendar, when we know that goes back to 3760 to 3761 BC, is a type of anchoring point that deals with cosmic spiritual creation. You hear that? Cosmic spiritual creation. It didn't say natural creation. It said cosmic spiritual creation. So if you're reading that book based upon a natural or secular life, you're reading it wrong. Okay? Because the core purpose of the Hebrew book was for religious tracking and biblical lineage. Okay? Biblical lineage. And we know B said the nationality of the English person or the English people is with the church. Okay? We fit right in there. Let's see, do I have it here? We know he said, and B's created BC. Where is it at? Let's just pull it up. English identity. Talking about English people. English national identity. Y'all better pay attention. See the lions, right? Right there in back of us. Scholars disagree on the history and nature of the distinct English national identity. According to some scholars, a national identity of the English as the people or ethnic group dominant in England can be traced to the Anglo-Saxon period. Once again, I'm going to go real slow for all of you. If you ever watch this video, you better take it to your next door neighbor, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, because I'm laying it down for you plain and simple from BC to AD, all right? And we know that the Hebrew calendar deals with cosmic creation and spiritual. So if you're being created at that timeline, you must be, in fact, an angel, okay? An angel, okay? An angel, a child of God. According to some scholars, the scholars, don't take my word, take the scholars, okay? All right, so you don't need a blood test for this. A national identity of the English as the people, no one else. It didn't say Irish, Scotland, Jamaican, Moorish. It didn't say none of that. It said the English, okay, as a people or ethnic group. Dominant England can be traced to the Anglo-Saxon period. Now, what does Imre Ahmad Hassan say about the identity and nationality of the English people and not that based upon the damn color of a skin? All right? Because the white people try to say they, in fact, are the Anglo-Saxon, okay, i.e. the English people. But I find that hard to believe. I find that hard to believe. It's just case law, common law. We're going to look at two cases. This case right here, United States versus Bhagat Singh Thind. Point 4. We're going to go there in a second. All right? We're going to go there in a second. I'm tired of playing with people. I don't need your help. I don't need your assistance because this is the absolute undiluted truth. Okay? What it says, the scripture says that prophet is not honored in his own house. Okay? Or in his own land. And I'm going for days about that. You know what I'm saying? So when somebody try to do something right, they never get recognition. That's how you recognize somebody who is a true teacher. Okay? Because everybody can get on this wagon. All right? It ain't for everybody. So this case law, particular case law, Imre Ahmad Hassan was quoted from the Supreme Court, and in another case in the Supreme Court called United States Bhagat Singh Thind, all based upon the identity and nationality in modern day, okay, based upon the Gregorian calendar that you all use, okay, we're going to use that calendar. In modern day, who classify as a citizen, okay, who classified as a citizen under the Naturalization Act, which was created for foreign aliens. I didn't say that. That's what Benjamin Franklin said. The Naturalization Act was for foreign aliens, but yet Bhagat Singh Thind was the case that dealt with those who are classified as white people, but not based upon the aberration of the skin, but based upon the nationality, based upon their origin, which Europeans were classified as white people. Okay, Middle Eastern, North African, they were all classified as white people. But don't listen to me. Let the case law do the talking for you. To summarize the approach which must be followed in deciding whether a particular person applying for citizenship is a white person within the meaning of the statute, what statute is talking about? The Naturalization Act of 1790. As interpreted by the Supreme Court, it is necessary, when they say Supreme Court, they're talking about the Bhagat Singh Thind case, okay? As interpreted by the Supreme Court, it is necessary to determine first the particular group or racial subdivision to which the individual belongs. In practical effects, proof of this fact is a matter of genealogy. Okay? Genealogy, an individual who presents an aberration from the color of skin of a group of which he is a member, such as a light-skinned Chinese or Japanese or a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, does not thereby acquire a different status under the act from other members of its group. So the members of the group not just are in dark-skinned, but they are classified as Anglo-Saxon. If that is a fact that the Anglo-Saxon are dark-skinned, that will fit right into what Beads is saying about the English nationality of the Anglo-Saxon, which is clearly dark-skinned, and then that will also qualify what they say in the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica in regard to the Berbers who governments intertwined with the Anglo-Saxon based upon the body of politics at that particular time, which is what we call Witten or Wittenmont. Okay? So it says right here, dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon does not acquire a different status from other members of his group. All right? So you need to make sure that you are, in fact, a member of that group based upon being a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, and it does have nothing to do with your mother or your father or a blood test or a birth certificate, none of that, because the only way you can prove that is affiliated, as Bede said, with the English church. Okay? With the English. All right? Now let's read this correctly based upon case law. Okay? Oh, I forgot to go here. So we see the dark skinned are what? Anglo-Saxon. That's what the case said, right? Now watch this connection. Watch this connection. If they are dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, not based upon the color of skin, but based upon a genealogy test, all right? And being what Bede just said, that the origin of the Anglo-Saxon, which we're going to go back to in a second, goes back to the Anglo-Saxon. So we can now prove that they are in fact dark-skinned, okay? Dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon. We can prove that right there. Now let's go back to what Bede said, because we know that the Anglo-Saxons are dark-skinned based upon not just the aberration, but based upon the genealogy test, all right? Now Bede said, let's read it in its entirety. According to the scholars, and we know judges are scholars, they know the law. A natural identity of the English as the people or ethnic group dominant in England can be traced to the Anglo-Saxon period. Now, he just said in Abraham Hassan that they were, in fact, dark-skinned, okay? All right? They were, in fact, dark-skinned people, and this was recorded in Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People, okay? Well before the Norman conquest of 1066, okay? Well before the Norman conquest of 1066. And it says here, similarly, Adrian Hastings considered England to be the oldest example of a mature nation and links the development of the nationhood to the Christian church and spread a written popular language to the existing ethnic groups. Did you hear what that just said? Did you hear what that just said? Okay? So if the Anglo-Saxon color skin are dark-skinned, and they are the Christian people, which goes back to the English church, then let's go here now. Let's go back to that case law. Abraham Hassan. Let's go right back there. They said they were dark-skinned Anglo-Saxons. Didn't it say that? That's what it just said. Like, share, subscribe, donate, free and common sources to $ Clifford Jefferson L. Assist your king. All this is for you. You can donate $1, $2, $3, $4, $5. Hell, you can give 10. That's the least you can ask for the return of your estate, which is in the hands of me, okay? Because I have the understanding, and I can return it back to you once I'm finished with these courts, okay? Because I'm reading what they say, all right? We're talking about dark-skinned Anglo-Saxons that are a part of the English church. They're your true Christians, all right? We call them Berbers. I didn't say that. The case law just said it. Why? Let's look at it. Same case law. Now, this district court case is being supported by the Supreme Court in United States versus Bhagat Singh thing, which is right here. Look at it, y'all. (1923) case. Let's go down to point 4. We ain't got to read everything in it. I already know where to go. Let's go to point 4. Let's start here. The word Caucasian is scarcely better repute. It is at best a conventional term with altogether fortuitous origin, which under scientific manipulation has come to include far more than the unscientific mind suspects. You hear that? This is case law we're reading. Not a report, not a thesis, but this is case law. Under scientific manipulation has come to include far more than the unscientific mind suspects. According to Kinu, for example, the world's people, it includes not only the Hindu, but some of the Polynesians. That is, the Maori, Tahitians, Samoans, Hawaiians, and others. The Hamatite, that's footnote 3. Okay, we're going to stop at footnote 4. The Hamites of Africa, upon the ground of Caucasian cast of their features, though in color they range from brown to black, we venture to think that the average well-informed white American will learn with some degree of astonishment that the race to which he belongs is made up of such heterogeneous elements, okay? Which is qualified by footnote 4. Just click that. Everyone see me click it? Boom. This where it brought us. Hence, it seems to require a strong mental effort to sweep into a single category, however elastic so many different peoples. Europeans, North Africans, West Asiatics, Iranians, and others, all the way to the Indo-Gangetic plains and uplands, whose complexion presents every shade of color except yellow, from white to the deepest brown and even black. But they are all grouped together in a single division because their essential properties are one. Their substantial uniformity speaks to the eyes that see below the surface. We recognize a common racial stamp in the facial expression, the structure of the hair, partly also the bodily proportions, in all of which points they agree more with each other than with the other main divisions. Even in a case of certain black or very dark races, such as the Bajas, Somalis, and a few other Eastern Hamitites, we are reminded instinctively more of Europeans or Berbers than of Negroes, thanks to their more regular features and brighter expressions. Okay? Right there. Okay? So that brings me here. The 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. This is the article about the European Berbers, which are clearly identified in Ray Ahmad Hassan as dark-skinned Anglo-Saxons, or, as they said in Bede's ecclesiastical origin of the identity of the English people, they are English Anglo-Saxons. Okay? It says, despite of a history of foreign conquest, Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Vandals, Arabs, and French, the Berber physical type and the parts of the Berber physical type and the Berber temperament and nationality have persisted since what? The Stone Age. Okay? It also states down here, Dr. Arthing Latham, who writes all that is not Arabic in the Kingdom of Morocco, all that is not Arabic in French province of Algeria, and all that is not Arabic in Tunis, Tripoli, and Fezzan, is Berber. So Arabs and Berbers are not the same. The explanation lies in the profound distinction of their characteristics. The Arab is a herdsman and a nomad. The Berber is an agriculturist and a townsman. The Arab has built his social structure on the Quran, which inculcates absolutism, aristocracy, and theocracy. The Berber, despite his nominal Muhammadanism, is a democratic with his Jimna, which we call Wittiman. We only call it Jimna because of the Arab or the Islamic influence as a result of what happened through the conquest of the Maghreb and the conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, which was all composed of European Berbers, as Bhagat Singh Ding said in a Supreme Court case supported by Imre Ahmad Hassan in the District Court case. But it says that the Berber, despite his nominal Muhammadism, is a Democrat with his Jimna or Wittiman and his Qanun or unwritten code called the Magna Carta of the individual liberties as opposed to the community's good. Now, why would these scholars in the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica make a connection to the Berbers and the English as they stated in the Supreme Court case in reference to Wittenman? Okay? Because what is Wittenman? Before we go back to the lesson plan. Witten. Anglo-Saxon Kings, which is Witten, biblical scene. In the illustrated Old English Hexapla, these are the 5 books of the Bible in the 11th century, portraying pharaohs in court sessions after passing judgment on his chief baker and chief cupbearer. The English Hexapla, which is the 5 books of, or the 6 books translated in your Bible. Okay? The Wittenman, or Witten means wise man, was the king's council in the Anglo-Saxon government from before the 7th century until the 11th century. It comprised of important noblemen, including aldermen, thanes, and bishops. Meaning of the Witten was sometimes called what? Wittenmat. We are the same people mentioned in Imre Ahmad Hassan. Okay? Supreme Court case law. Where is it at? So if they want to play the color game, let them play it. We got case law saying that the English people were dark-skinned, swarthy. Okay? Swarthy. You see that dark-skinned right there. Let's go back. This is how you teach. So we see the Hebrew calendar, 3761 or 3760, 3761 BC, dealt with cosmic spiritual creation, religious tracking, and biblical lineage, which includes the English, based upon what we just stated, and it also includes the Berber, based upon their historical political victories, which was dated all the way back to Shoshin, which core purpose was the preservation, continuity of the cultural identity. Okay, that was not done until 1980, versus the Gregorian calendar that you all follow and go by now, which is the year 2026, which includes everything we just talked about in the Berber calendar and the Hebrew Bible, dealing with religious civil standard and global synchronization. Okay, how clearer can this lesson get? Okay, let's get clearer. The English Read Now system dealt with royal succession and authority when it was put on the books, tracking parliamentary statutory law in regards to the birthright that was preserved from what? Time immemorial, which set the legal boundaries in protecting ancient property rights going back to time at a mine. Okay? Very, 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 very important. You don't understand how important this is to understanding your birthright. Okay? There is no English read-now year in 1065 AD because the read-now year system was invented and standardized by William the Conqueror when he invaded England in 1066. Okay? In 1065 AD, England was ruled by Anglo-Saxon King Edward the Confessor, a king of Wessex, I might add. The Anglo-Saxons did not use numerical read-now years to date their laws, charters, or taxes. Instead, they dated documents using the standard Christian calendar year Anno Domini, meaning what? In the year of the Lord. Why? Because they were the lords. Okay? They were the noblemen. We've seen it when they said Wittenmont, all the way back to the 5 books of the Hexateuch. Okay? We existed. All the way back to the Stone Age. We existed. Churches were built by stone. Okay? We're going to talk about that. Old Minister and New Ministers was built after the Gregorian mission to convert the Anglo-Saxons of Kent, not the Anglo-Saxons of Witten. Okay? Totally different. When William the Conqueror invaded England in 1066, he brought a continental Norman bureaucratic machine with him. To firmly establish royal authority and track tax collections, the Norman court stopped using the calendar year for state documents. Instead, they officially began dating things by the year of the official king's reign, meaning year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, all the way up to how many years that king reigned. Okay? This is why Edward the First didn't call himself Edward the First. Okay? Pre-conquest kings lacked regnal numbers. Because regnal numbering didn't exist in Anglo-Saxon England, kings back then didn't use numbers. This is why King Edward the Confessor, who ruled from 1042 to 1066, is not called Edward the First. That didn't start till he was the son of Henry III, okay, of the Plantagenet crown, okay. When a new numerical system was later adopted, historians restarted the count entirely in making Edward I, who took the throne in 1272, hence time immemorial, the official first Edward completely bypassed Edward the Confessor, Anglo-Saxon king, a king of Wessex, who came before 1066. Okay? We must understand time immemorial. Okay? Time immemorial. Let's look at it real quick. There you go, 1275. King Henry II, the father of Richard I. King Henry II was the son of Godfrey, the fifth kind of man Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem, which started the Plantagenet crown. Which started the Plantagenet crown, brothers and sisters. King Henry II, son of Godfrey. This gave our right to prescriptive rights. Okay? What is prescriptive right? You know what prescriptive right is? The right of reversion and remanding of our lawful estates. Okay? A prescriptive right is an easement and a non-possessory right to use or enter onto real property of another without actually possessing that property. Okay? This is why you have a deed, but I ain't got time to go into that. But it's called a prescriptive right, which is an easement. Okay? Going all the way back to time immemorial. We preserve our right to by way of reversion and management of our lawful estate, which means that those who have our estate only have it by way of prescriptive right, which is called an easement, and that only through the power of the eminent domain power of the state or the eminent domain power of the federal government. Okay? What they really don't have, that capacity. They only have it if you let them have it. Let's go back. chronological break, the legal year zero. In the eyes of the English common law, the historical timeline of legal record keeping effectively begins on October 14th, 1066, at the Battle of Hastings. This involved Edward the Confessor. Anything that happened in 1065 or earlier belongs to the pre-conquest of the Anglo-Saxons. You hear that? Pre-conquest means before they invaded. So if Ray Hassan said they were dark-skinned, and we know they were Berbers because the same government that they had was called Wittenmont, and we know that that government had to exist all the way to the Stone Age, because in Ray Hassan says that they were dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, and they think about those Europeans, they were more inclined to say Berbers. Okay? Very, very, very important to understand what it is that I'm saying to you. Okay? So because the entire legal structure of England was rewritten by William the Conqueror and his officials, they simply chose not to backdate the calendar formulas into the Anglo-Saxon past, which is our lusty history. Now comes into the understanding of the difference between 525, which is where the term AD was created, and 731, which B's built off it, okay? Which is dealt with AD in the year of our Lord. But this is all reference to the Gregorian calendar, not the Hebrew calendar and not the Berber calendar. Okay? We're talking about the Gregorian calendar, and we're working our way all the way up from 1 AD all the way up to 525 parts of AD. And for that, we need to go back to 325 AD, dealing with Constantine, which we'll go to in a second. But I need to show you the difference between the purpose and intent of the application of that term AD, Annos Dominius, in the year of our Lord. Okay? You need to know this before you use it. What you should be using is BC. Okay? What is the difference between the use of 525 AD Annos Dominius and versus B's 731 AD Annos Dominius in the year of the Lord? The core difference in that is 525 AD, the Annos Dominius AD system was just a niche mathematical calculation buried in the Easter calendar, meaning what day would Easter Sunday fall on. Only. Narrow argument, okay? But by 731, Bede transformed it into a universal historical timeline. This is the same one who wrote the identity of the English people. Isn't it? Just make sure. Bedes. Ecclesiastical history of the English people. Yeah, it's the same Bedes. Same one. Let me show y'all that. It's the same Bedes. You see it, right? Bedes. Make sure you can see that. Where's he at? Okay. You see it, right? Bedes. Same one. Okay? The same one. Now we're talking about what did Bedes do with the AD calendar created by Dionysius Usus. All right? Very important. The core difference is that in 525, the Annus Dominius system was just a niche mathematical calculation buried in the Eastern calendar. By 731 AD, Bedes transformed into a universal historical timeline. A universal historical timeline. The practical, technical, and cultural differences between these two moments shape how we view history in the modern day. Okay? Let's just go into this real quick. 1. The scope of use. Easter table versus world history. Once again, Easter table versus world history. We know that AD is moving forward and not backwards, okay? You need BC for that. And Bede created BC. And he used AD to support he used BC to support his AD in lieu of the continuity and the preservation of world history. Okay? At 525, Dionysius Eschylus created the AD system for one specific narrow reason: to calculate the future date of Easter Sunday. He only applied the label Annos Dominicus to a 95-year calendar table. He did not use it to write history or date legal documents. You must understand the purpose of why Dionysius instituted AD was clearly for the narrow interpretation of what day Easter fell on. And we know Easter has to do with the Son of God. Okay? Versus 731 AD, almost 20 years later, all right, Bede realized the system's potential for storytelling when he applied AD to all human history, anchoring every major political event, battle, and reign to a single continuous timeline. So you won't need the Hebrew Bible for that, because that is a cosmic book, okay? That is a cosmic book. And Bede used not only the Gregorian information to modern time, but he also went BC to link up with Shoshin, the 22nd ruler of the Libyan Berber dynasty that they falsely call Egyptians. Okay. 2. Directionality. Okay. Forward only, inventing BC. Okay. It gets good, y'all. How many of y'all knew this information? How many of y'all knew this information? And even if you did know it or you're finding out now, you're still going to go back after you watched it and forget all about it. You're still going to forget it because you're comfortable. Okay? But it said, great power comes great responsibility. In 525, Annos Dominicus, in the year of our Lord. All right? Annos Dominicus meaning the year of the Lord. Okay? And lieu of what's going on in AM meaning in the creation of the world. Okay? All involving from the cosmic creation to the present day. In 525, Dionysius only looked forward. He wanted to know when Easter would fall in the years ahead. So his system only counted into the future from its calculated point of Christian incarnation. That's anywhere from 30 AD and after, or 33 AD and after, because at this time he's supposed to be walking on earth from 1 AD to 30. Okay? We didn't get to the apostate age till about 30 AD, which goes back to what we call the apostolic council. All right, which we'll talk about in a second. In 731, Bede needed to handle events that happened before Jesus was born, like Julius Caesar invasion of Britain, as well as all the other shit that they claim happened. To solve this, Bede became the first historian to count backwards. To count backwards. Now, it's the same one, or the same person who said the identity of the English person is with the church. And we know that, and that's based upon a nationality. So it does not involve your mother and parents. It denotes your connection to the church that God created, because all these churches that God created is based upon the interpretation of who they say your God is. And as I always say, you write your books, set your timeline. We're going based upon the timeline and the books that Bede created, and based upon the laws that support what Bede, based upon either you're dealing with nationality or aberration of a color of skin. But it clearly points to the fact of both of them that they were in fact Berbers. Okay? So in 731, Bede was the first scholar to count backwards. Okay? How many of you knew that? Who was affected by this? Okay? Who was affected geopolitically by what was done by Dionysius, and who was affected geopolitically by what was done by Bede? Okay? Very important. In 525, Dionysius was a monk working locally in Rome, Italy, only. His calculation was meant for the Pope and Roman clergy to solve a specific theological dispute with the Church of Alexander and Egypt in regards to what day Easter would fall on, which was a Sunday. Okay, only 20 years later, in 731 A.D., Bede was working in Northumbria, modern day northern England Scotland border. You hear that? Because his book, The Ecclesiastical History of the English People, became an international medieval bestseller. He successfully exported the system out of a monolistic libraries and into mainstream consciousness of Western Europe. Okay? That is very, very, very important because let's go here. A legal person. We can thank our ancestors who were students of the monks. Corporate law, corporate governance, corporate title, economics. In law, a legal person is any person or legal entity that can do the things a human person is usually able to do in law. You hear that? We're talking about angels. We're talking about a capacity. We're talking about an office, such as enter into contract, sue and be sued, own property, and so on and so forth. The reason for the term legal person is that some legal persons are not humans, persons. Companies and corporations, business entities are persons legally speaking. They can legally do most of the things that an ordinary person can do, but they are not, in a literal sense, what? Human beings. You hear that? Now we know what they can do in the modern sense, but let's trace it back to the origin of where it comes from. How many of you knew this? Let's look at it. The concept of the legal personhood for organizations of people is at least as old as ancient Rome. A variety of collegial institutions enjoyed the benefit under what? Roman law. We're not Roman. Okay? We're not Roman. All right? I'm going to show you why we're not Roman, because we didn't follow Roman Christianity that deals with the cathedrals and the monasteries that were supported by Roman clergy. Okay? It says the doctrine has been attributed to Pope Innocent IV. So we're talking about legal fictions, persona ficta, which is the Latin term for a legal person. All right. It was attributed to Pope Innocent IV. Now we know Pope Innocent IV. If you track his successors, you come into Pope Innocent III. And we know Pope Innocent III declared that the English Church should be free. The English Church, just as Bede said that the English Church should be free. Pope Innocent IV created legal fiction. Okay? Persona ficta. Bishop of Rome. All right? Let's count back 4 successors from Pope Innocent IV, because you can't have a Pope Innocent IV, so you have a Pope Innocent III. Okay? Let's go back 4 predecessors. 1, Pope Celestine. 2, Pope Gregory IX. 'Then we have Honorius III, Pope Honorius III. And then who we have next? Pope Innocent III. The one who declared that the English Church should be free. All right? Very important that you comprehend my understanding. Okay. So the doctrine has been attributed to Pope Innocent IV, and you count backwards 4 predecessors, you'll come to Pope Innocent III. Okay? And he said he was attributed to the idea of persona ficta, as it's called in Latin. In canon law, the doctrine of persona ficta allowed monasteries to have a legal existence that was apart from the monks, simplifying the difficulty and balancing the need for such groups to have infrastructure, though the monks took vows of personal poverty, meaning that you didn't own shit. Okay? None of us own this. It belongs to God and God's church. We only overseers, all right? Trustees of it. But everybody want to own something that don't belong to it because of that damn word, an easement. Prescription of sovereignty. Okay? You're not sovereign until God declares you being sovereign, and for that, you need to go back to the sovereignty of our existence. Okay? Can you go back that far? No, you cannot. So in 731 AD, Bede was working in Northumbria, modern-day northern England, Scotland, because his book, The Ecclesiastical History of the English People, became an international medieval bestseller. He successfully exported the system out of monistic libraries and into the mainstream consciousness of Western Europe. So they weren't doing it based upon in their private capacity. They were doing it in their corporate capacity as monks. Okay? Following the wishes of the head monk, which was called abbot. We know the word abbot means father. Okay? Very, 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 very important. So let's get a summary comparison. Dionysius' calendar moved forward versus Bede's calendar moved forward and backwards. Okay? Retrospectively and prospectively. Okay? Primary goal of 525 AD's interpretation was the finding of the correct date of Easter versus the standardized chaotic historical dates that was done and was used by way of Bede creating the term BC, before the incarnation of Christ. The impact based upon Dede's importation of 1 AD only dealt with was dealt with as a local theological tool versus Bede's implementation of AD with the foundation of modern global calendar. Okay? Very, 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 very important. So Bede essentially invented the concept of before Christ. He just didn't call it that. Okay? He didn't call it that. In 731, Bede became the first major historian to logically extend the Annus Dominios timeline backwards to date events before the birth of whoever is supposed to be the anointed. Okay? Here's exactly how he did it and why he called it that. The Latin phrase he created. Bede wrote his history in Latin. When describing the events that happened before the year 1 AD, he used the Latin phrase ante incarnationis Dominici tempus, which translated as before the time of the Lord's incarnation. This phrase is the direct linguistic ancestor of our modern English term before Christ, i.e. BC. Okay, so now we know who created the term BC, and we know who created the term AD, and we know that who built upon AD. And you can't know where you're going out in AD, i.e. the future, until you understand your past. And for that, you need Bedes. Okay? But the past was only reserved for those who it belonged to, not those who have no knowledge of the so-called past. As I said, he who writes your books sets your timeline. 2. Why he had invented it. Why did Bede invent BC? Before Bede, the monk Dionysius Exiguus only created a timeline that moved forward into the future. But Bede was writing a comprehensive history of Britain, and he needed to talk about the historic figures who lived prior to Jesus, such as Julius Caesar and a host of them. Without a backward counting system, he would have had to rely on messy Roman calendars. By inventing the anti before concept, he kept this entire book unified under one single Christian timeline. The one thing he missed was the year 0. Because Bede was counting backwards for the first time, he made a mathematical omission that still impacts our calendar today. He did not include the year 0. In Bede's system, point so. In Bede's system, the year immediately preceding 1 AD was 1 BC. This is why modern historians and astronomers still have to adjust their math with calculating time intervals across the AD and BC divide. While the exact abbreviation BC wasn't universally standard in English books until what? The 16th and 17th century, it was Bede's historical framework in 731 AD that birthed the idea of BC, but it was not used until the 16th and 17th century, and that was with the institution of the Gregorian calendar founded by Pope Gregory XIII, stemming from Pope Gregory I conversion of the Anglo-Saxon into Roman Catholic Christianity, which we know legal fiction or persona fiction was created by a Roman priest, Pope Innocent III. The fourth. 16th century calendars. The Gregorian calendar, this massive academic push was directly triggered by Pope Gregory XIII introducing the Gregorian calendar in 1582, i.e. those dealing with 1 AD up to 1582. The calendar reform forced the entire Western world to mathematically re-examine how time was calculated. Did you hear that? It's right there. Now we know the year 950, the Hebrew year and the Gregorian year, the year 950 in the Berber calendar and the Hebrew year is the year 3760, which in the Gregorian year is the year 1 BC. Okay? Now we understand that the Berber calendar existed, it's called Yen-Ner, but when it was created by the Algerian historian, it was backdated till it was created in 1980, and it was anchored in the date circling around 950, bringing us to the time of the Pharaoh Shishak that's mentioned in the actual biblical story. Okay, and he used that timeline, that historical story, to anchor the history of the Berber people and to preserve the history and continuity up to the present day, which makes the year 2976. And if you subtract 2026, which is the Gregorian year, which then come about to the 16th century, which is just said under Pope Gregory XIII, then the actual year of subtracting 2026 from 2765 would be the year 950, which he instituted to go back that far. All right, and all symbolic of what? The Pharaoh Shishak. Because Bede was a medieval monk operating strictly from the text of the Latin Vulgate Bible, and early church fathers like St. Jerome and Eusebius, he did not possess modern archaeological knowledge about Shishak's Libyan lineage or Egyptian inscriptions. Instead, Bede's documented Shishak in two specific contexts. Let's look at the context. In his chronicle of the fourth age of the world, in his scientific and historical book, The Reckoning of Time, the Temporum Rationale, Bede organized all human existence into 6 world ages. Shishak features prominently in Bede's tracking of the fourth age, which Bede calculating as spanning from King David to the Babylonian captivity. Okay? Bede meticulously records the timeline of the kings of Judah. He noted that in the 5th year of the reign of King Rehoboam, Solomon's son, Shishak invades Jerusalem and strips the temple of its wealth. For Bede, this event was a major chronological milestone used to synchronize the timeline of the Middle East and Egypt. Now, he did the same. The Algerian scholar did the very same exact thing that Bede did, and recording the history going all back to Shishak in the 10th century. Okay? Very, very, very important. It says, for B's, this event was a major chronological milestone using to synchronize the timeline of the Middle East and Egypt. 2. As an instrument of divine judgment. In his theological commentaries on the books of the Kings, on the books of the Kings and Chronicle, Bees interpreted history through a purely spiritual lens. He did not view Shishak as an independent empire builder, but rather as a tool used by God to punish Israel for its sins. Bees emphasized that the biblical narrative that after King Solomon's death, the people of Judah abandoned God's law. Okay? We know Bees went backwards. He didn't go forwards, he went backwards. Okay? Therefore, Bees wrote that the God allowed Shishak to easily capture the fortified cities of Judah and plunder Solomon's golden shield as a physical reminder of what happens when nations lose divine protection. Okay? What is the meaning of the temple treasures? Let's look at that. Bees love allegorical symbolic writing. When writing about Shishak stealing the gold treasures from the temple, Bees interpreted this spiritually for his medieval monks. Okay? The gold shield of Solomon represents the spiritual protection and virtues of the faithful. You understand, when we look at God's light, it always has that golden amber look. Okay? Shishak stealing them symbolizes how sin and worldly temptation plunges a person's soul, leaving them spiritually unprotected against the devil. When we look at a spiritual soul, souls only denote to natural people, where legal fictions are those who do not have a soul because they are not natural people. They are spiritual entities. So the monks didn't represent themselves as natural people with souls. They were truly inclined to do the will of God, which means that they denied their secular lives. Okay? This is what every one of you should be doing in this present day. Okay? Very, very, very important. Give up your cross and follow the Christ, the anointing, the message, okay? This message that you're hearing now. Shishak stealing them symbolizes how sin and worldly temptation plunder a person's soul, leaving them spiritually unprotected against what? The devil's wills. The way Bees document Shishak ties directly into why the history is so fascinating. To a modern scholar, Shishak's invasion of Judah is a crucial anchor for Berber Egyptian chronology. To the early medieval Venerable Bede, it was a precise numerical bookmark in his cosmic timeline. Did you hear that? In his cosmic timeline, as stated in the Record of Time, the fourth book. When Bede tracks Shishak in his masterwork, the Record of Time, he refers to him in his Latin vocate name, Sisak. Let's go here. The exact chronological marker. In chapter 66 of the Record of Time, where Bede maps out his fourth age of the world, he records the timeline, hear that? Timeline, broken chain of title of the ancient kings. Rehoboam reigned for 17 years. In his 5th year, Shishak or Shoshin, king of Egypt, invaded Jerusalem and took away the treasures of the house of the Lord. We already know the symbolic or allegorical story of what they meant. Because Bede did not have access to Egyptian hieroglyphics or North African records, he relied entirely on the mathematical framework of the Bible. For Bede, this specific event was not just a random military battle, but a critical chronological baseline that he used to count the exact number of years from creation, 3761 BC of the world, to its present day in Anglo-Saxon England, 731 AD. Okay? Hidden connection. Let's look at it. The brilliance of our observation, which is really my observation, is that Bede's mathematical timeline completely mirrors the logic of the Berber calendar, even though they were formulated over 1,000 years apart. The Berber calendar logic, modern Berber historian looks back at the exact same Egyptian dynasty changed in 950 BC and symbolically marked that baseline of their ethnic timeline. Okay? Bede's logic, Bede looks backward at the exact same moment, Rehoboam's 5th year, to keep his global timeline from drifting. Without realizing it, the early medieval monks in England and the ancient agriculturists of North Africa was tracking the exact same geopolitical shift the moment of the West Libyan chieftains asserted the dominance over what we call the Near East. That's Europe, y'all. That's Europe. History intersected the pharaoh, the monk, and the Berber calendar. I'm not going to read that. I'm going to go back down a little further. Okay, the intersection, why this matters. This historical overlap reveals a profound truth about how humans construct history. The modern Berber's cultural movement and the 8th century English monk arrived at the exact same geopolitical event to anchor their realities. Okay? The actors. Shoshin, the Berber conqueror. The Venerable Bede, Shishak, the instrument of divine judgment. The event, rise of the 22nd Egyptian dynasty. Venerable Bede, the sack of the Temple of Jerusalem. The purpose, to assert indigenous pride and identity, and for Venerable Bede to provide a universal chronological truth. The goal, anchoring future of the culture, and for Venerable Bede, anchoring the path of global theology. You hear that? The good with the bad. Without ever knowing of one another, the medieval monks of England and the ancient agricultures of North Africa bound their timeline to that very same Libyan king, Shishak. Wasn't just a conqueror of land, he became a conqueror of time itself. Okay? A conqueror of time itself. Now here's a chronological chart mapping the AD timeline to the Berber Almazine calendar from 1 AD up to the current year 2026, which for us will be the year 2976, using the 950 mathematical offset as an anchor. Okay? Look at it, brothers and sisters. Gregorian calendar. Okay? 1 AD, and the Gregorian calendar is 951 in the Berber calendar, and in the Hebrew calendar, it would be the year 3761. But that is irrelevant right now because right now, at that, and according to their calendar, the world is being created. Okay? We ain't even here yet. Okay? So we can only go off 1 AD and based upon the Gregorian calendar and the Berber calendar. Okay? And they go all the way chronologically up into the present day. So it's 1 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 1050 in the Berber calendar. Let me go backwards. So 1 AD in the Gregorian calendar is 950 in the Berber calendar. If it's 1 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 1050 in the Berber calendar. If it's 200 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 1150 in the Berber calendar. If it's 300 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 1250 in the Berber calendar. If it's 500 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 1450 in the Berber calendar. If it's 700 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 1650 in the Berber calendar. If it's 100 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 1950 AD in the Berber calendar. If it's 1500 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 2450 in the Berber calendar. If it's 1900 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 2850 in the Berber calendar. If it's 1966 AD in the Gregorian calendar, it's 29. If it's 2916 in the Berber calendar. If it's 1980 in the Gregorian calendar, it's 2930 in the Berber calendar. And we know that it was in 1980 that the Algerian declared that the Berber calendar will be dated symbolically in 950 BC, so the time representing the time where Shoshin or Shishak or Sisak came to sit on the throne of what we call the Berber Empire or Egyptian Empire. We also have 2001 AD, which would be equivalent to 2151 AD in the Berber calendar. Then you have 2011 AD in the Gregorian, which would be the year 2961 in the Berber calendar. And last but not least, the year 2926 and the Gregorian calendar would be the year 2976, which would be the current year. And you subtract 2976 from, if you subtract 2026 from 2976, you come right back up to the what? Year 950. 950, the anchor and date. Did I go back too far? Hold on. Yeah, it'd be 950. Because 1 AD is 951 AD. But we know Bede invented BC. Okay? Not Dionysius, but Bede invented BC, and he declared the identity of the English people affiliated with not a nation, but a church. Okay? Right there. Like, share, subscribe. Donate free and common circle to your king. $ Clifford Jefferson L. Let's go back a little further. Let's talk about Christianity from 1 AD to 325 AD. Let's talk about that, okay? Give me a second. Let me warm my coffee up. Okay. All right, let's get it. Tell me about Christianity from 1 AD to 325 AD. All right, we already started from Bede's 525 and 731, so let's go a little bit further. All right, a little bit retrospectively to the origin where that stemmed from. Between 1 AD, Annus Dominius, and 325 AD, Christianity underwent a massive transformation. It grew from a tiny perspective people identify as Jews, Israelites, Canaanites, whatever term or terminology you should throw on it, all right, which was a set of royal people living in Judea into the dominant legally protected religion of the Roman Empire. We know for the Roman Empire, we go to the history of Rome, okay? But you need that. You need BC for that, and that wasn't created till B's, okay? All right? You can't do that with Dionysius' timeline. You need to use B's timeline to go into what happened before AD, okay? All right? It says this era is historically known as the Ante-Nicene period, before the Christianity existed, okay? So right now, at this time, you're just warning people, okay? The era historically known as the Ante-Nicene period, the time before the Council of Nicaea. It's defined by rapid geographic expansion, intense empirical persecution, and the slow development of church structure and theology, okay? We're using an AD calendar, not the Hebrew calendar, okay? The geographic evolution of the 1 AD calendar all the way to 325 AD by those who created it, okay? Early Christians spread primarily along the Roman shipping lanes and trade networks, moving organically from the urban east to the west. This is based upon the Apostolic foundation, based upon the empirical growth, which came to an end through the Nicene turning point of the Council of Nicene by way of what we call the Edict of Milan, which we talk about now. The four main eras of early Christianity. We already know from 1 AD to 33 AD deals with the death of that person that was supposed to be called or identified as what? The Messiah. You call him Jesus. Origin. The origin. Following the crucifixion of Jesus from 30 to 33 AD, okay, his immediate disciples began preaching his resurrection. These were called the apostolic age, okay? The Gentile shift. At the Council of Jerusalem, which is in 48 AD, okay, the Apostolic Council or the Council of Jerusalem, leaders like Paul argued successfully that non-Jews, Gentiles, could become Christians without adopting the Jewish canon or ecclesiastical law. This decision allowed the faith to become global rather than localized, okay? Writing the text. The original eyewitnesses began dying off, prompting a writing of the Gospel of Epistles, the New Testament, to preserve the tradition and customs that happened from 1 AD to 30 to 33 AD, okay? From then, you get to what they call the Apostolic Age and the Apostolic Apology that lasts from 1 AD to 250 AD. This is going on through what we call the imperial persecutions that they were suffering, okay? Under the Apostolic Fathers, that started from the Apostle Council of Jerusalem, okay? They wrote apologists. They were apologists. This is a result of the conflicts of the persecution by the imperials that were had them at a lower state of existence as a result of the lack of identity. Slaves to their identity. House churches. Because the religion was unauthorized, Christians met in secret house churches, local congregations which were led by bishops to maintain order. Intellectual defenses. Thinkers like Justin Martyrs, Tertullian, and Origen wrote apologies which were formal defenses to Roman officials. See, the people had representatives. They used Greek philosophy to argue that Christians were lower moral subjects, not dangerous subversives. 3. Era of imperial persecution. This was from 64 AD to 311 AD until the Edict of Milan, which brought the Constantine, what you call influence. Persecution by Roman state was not continuous, but it happened in devastating waves, okay? So from 64 AD to 311, the attacks increased, okay? The early localized attacks begun under Emperor Nero in 64 AD, who blamed Christians for the Great Fire of Rome. Apostles Peter and Paul were executed during that era as a result of it. Then you had the empire-wide persecution by 250 AD through Emperor Decius, ordering that all citizens to make pagan sacrifice to revitalize the empire. Those who refused were what? Executed and tortured. Okay? These are the historical facts. The Great Persecution from 303 to 311 AD under Emperor Diocletian. The state ordered churches destroyed, scriptures burned, and clergy arrested in a final brutal attempt to wipe out the faith. It fell due to the public revulsion at the bloodshed and the high numbers of Christians. Okay? Now we come to the Constantine turning point. All right? This is before the Gregorian mission happening here in England. But we know ecclesiastical identity of the English people by Bede, who wrote and established BC, going back to the cosmic creation of God and his children. They're not talking about it by Dionysian, excuse me, nor the Roman Church. Constantine turning point, 312 AD to 325 AD. The Edict of Milan. Following a report vision of a Christian symbol, which is the Pisces fish, before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, Emperor Constantine won control of Western Empire. He and his Emperor Licinius issued an Edict of Milan which legalized Christianity and returned confiscated church property. Confiscated and returned church property. Okay? Leviticus 25:10. Okay? Right there. He legalized and returned confiscated church property. Now in modern day, that's 16:1-28. Rights stated on the Charter of Great Britain say from repeal an act to incorporate trustees for property held and corporates in place thereof. Okay? Persona ficta. Legal persons. Corporate capacity that the Roman Church don't have because there are two different capacities for two different interests, and the interest is the people. Okay? First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, now acting as the patron of the church. All right? Constantine called bishops of Nicaea to resolve massive internal theological disputes, which we had to deal with Arianism. Okay? When you deal with Arianism, you have to be loose with that word. Okay? You can denote to groups of people. All right? It can also symbolically denote to I'm not even going to go into that. Just be careful with the word or the term Arianism. All right. The council created the Nicene Creed, finalizing the standard Christian orthodoxy, and marking the end of the early underground church. Okay. Very, very, very important. So from 1 AD to 30 AD or 33 AD, you deal with this person identified as the Christ. We say this person is King Edgar the Peaceful, okay, which I'm the reincarnation of his present day, based upon the timeline of the English kings, as well as the historical timeline of the English kings, all right, as well as their connection to Burbage by way of the fact that their main preservation was land, okay, property, okay. They were agriculturists. This is who they were, okay. Preservation of the land. So let's get a quick summary of the early milestones or early Christian milestones. 30 to 33 AD, crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, the foundational theological event of Christianity. When we say crucifixion, resurrection, we're talking about him not being a natural person now, but yet a spiritual entity, okay? A legal person, okay? A legal person, that's who he is to us. It's an office, okay? Held by a natural person. Then we have 48 AD, which is the Council of Jerusalem, separated Christianity from strict adherence to Jewish law. Then from 70 AD, you had the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem, shifted the centers of Christianity away from Judea into Greco-Roman cities. Then from 303 AD, Diocletian great persecutions, the final and most severe imperial attempts to eradicate Christianity, which is from what is said from 64 AD to 303 AD. Then come to 313 AD with the Edict of Milan, granting total religious freedom to Christianity across the Roman Empire, which is now what we call in modern day the First and Fifth Amendment. 325 AD, you have the First Council of Nicene, ununified church doctrine, and institutionalized state-backed Christianity. Okay? All right, this is 325 AD. Now we're going to connect 325 AD to 597 Gregorian mission to England. Okay? To England. How many of you can make that connection? Bees did it. Okay? Bees did it. He wasn't talking about no other person or other people but the English people, and that was a reference to BC, his cosmic connection to the timeline that's linked up to the modern day. And we know that it also includes the Berbers because that's who he made the timeline reference to when he dated it back that far. Okay? Yes, the growing mission of 597 is connect directly back to Emperor Constantine and the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. This connection is both theological and institutional. Listen close, y'all. The Gregorian mission was not a random expedition. It was a deliberate effort by Pope Gregory the Great to expand a specific version of state-backed Roman Catholic Christianity that Constantine had legalized and instructed nearly 300 years earlier. You hear that? So the Gregorian mission is rooted and anchored in what was anchored in 325 AD by Constantine, going all the way back to the foundation of Christianity that stems from those who believe in that entity called Jesus Christ, which starts in 1 AD, but that cannot be the case because it was not, AD was not brought to fruition till 525 AD by Dionysius Eusebius. Okay? We must not overlook these facts that I'm bringing to you. The legal imperial blueprint. Hold this. Hold that thought. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. The legal imperial blueprint. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine called the First Council of Nicaea. By doing this, he transferred Christianity from a persecuted underground sect into a favorite structured religion of the Roman Empire. Okay? Different type of Christianity, though. Y'all must understand that it's not the same for all those who think it is. He established the idea that the Roman state and the Christian church should work together to civilize the world. Okay? This all goes back to Augustine of Canterbury and Pope Gregory the Great. In 597 AD, and we're talking about the Roman Catholic Church, not the English Church, because Pope Innocent III said the English Church was free, but yet he was a Roman Pope. He was a Pope. Okay? And we know that the legal fiction to protect the property of the English church was created by Pope Innocent IV. Okay? Pope Innocent said the corporate capacity and the property that belongs under the corporate capacity of the English church remain free. Okay? And that was preserved by way of what we call a legal person, persona ficta, i.e. a corporation. Okay? That existed way modern day, but you must be a monk. Okay? Remember that show they had, Monk, when he was a lawyer? There was a TV show called The Monk. I think he was a lawyer or a private investigator, something like that. All right? The Nicene Creed, defending orthodoxy. All right? So we know what they did in 597 when Pope Gregory the Great sent Augustine to England. He was acting on the Constantine blueprint. Gregory built the Anglo-Saxons not just as a religious pagans, but as people outside the civilized boundaries of Roman world. So they want to call us pagans because we outside the Roman world. No, we weren't pagans. We worship God in our own way of worshiping God, which to them was a pagan worship. The mission aimed to reabsorb England into legal cultural legacy of Constantine Christian Roman Empire. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Okay, so from 325 to 597 was already a plan instituted to go forward, not backwards. They had no intention of going backwards to the origin where all this shit stemmed from. Okay? The Nicene Creed defending orthodoxy. The 325 AD, Constantine tasked the bishops of Nicaea with defining exactly what Christians believed in, resulting in the Nicene Creed. This was meant to stamp out heresies, specifically Arianism, and create a unified standard theology. Okay? A unified standard theology, a belief. Okay? In 597, the primary theological package by St. Augustine brought to Kent was the exact Nicene orthodoxy. The Gregorian mission required the Anglo-Saxon kings to accept the Trinity as defined by Constantine bishops in 325 AD. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? I don't think y'all did. Okay? And even if you did hear it, you're probably not going to listen, but hey, that's your prerogative. Nonetheless, point 3 states that the Great Easter Battle, the Computus, the most fierce practical connection between 325 AD and 527 was a major calendar dispute on what day did the Passover, or the what we call Easter Sunday, fall on. In 325, this was Dionysius used his AD for, but that wasn't the purpose for beads. All right, very important. Constantine and the Council of Nicaea officially decreed how the date of Easter should be calculated, separated from the Jewish Passover calendar. In 597, when Gregorian missionaries arrived in England, Kent, they discovered that a local Celtic Christians who had been isolated from the Romans for centuries were using an older, outdated calendar. St. Augustine demanded that they change their calendar to match the Nicene standard of 325 AD. This sparked a massive, bitter dispute that lasted from nearly a century until the Anglo-Saxon officially surrendered to the Roman Decidian, dated at the Synod of Whitby in 664 AD. Okay? All right? Very, 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 very important. But there's a difference. Okay? Let's look at the difference. Restatement of the connection. The Gregorian mission of 597 AD was the vehicle that brought the legal authority, orthodoxy, theology, and calendar system established by Emperor Constantine at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD into the Anglo-Saxon world, permanently shaping the future English society. Okay? This is why I'm here. Was the old minster and new minster cathedral built because of the Gregorian mission? This is what most of us do not understand. No. The old minster and new minsters in Winchester were not built because of the Gregorian mission. Instead, they were constructed as part of a distinct later wave of Christianization spearheaded by the West Saxon monarchy and a separate papal mission. Okay? A separate papal mission. While both events were crucial to converting Anglo-Saxon England, they occurred at different times in different regions under different leaders. Okay, how many of you know that? The Gregorian mission versus the Winchester ministers. Okay, or should we say monks? I'm taking you step by step. No one else is going to do this for you. The Gregorian Mission versus Winchester Minster. The table below highlights the key differences in their timeline, location, and foundational motives. Okay? The Gregorian Mission, the origin date goes back to 597. Okay? Stemming all the way back to 325, the Council of Nicene Creed, all right, which is a result of this whole thing involving this Christ-like entity. Okay? Well, I'm telling you, he was already here. Okay, this was the purpose of why Old Minster and New Minster cathedral or monasteries were created, because of the Christ. Okay, the Christ, the anointing. Okay, so the date for the Gregorian Mission is 597. All right, and we know it only moves forward versus the Old Minster and New Minsters AD, which is rooted in what B said, which moves forward and retrospectively backwards, okay? Because this in all involves the English church. All right, we know that the Old Minster was built from 648 to 601, 660 AD, and then it switched from that Old Minster to New Minster as a result of the conflicts between the congregation, the monks. All right, primary religion under the Gregorian Mission. It was specifically sent to a region in southeast England called the Kingdom of Kent, versus the missionary movement sent by Bernardus under Pope Honorius to the Kingdom of Wessex, which was in southern England, not southeast but southern England. Key figures: the one for the Gregorian Mission was St. Augustine of Canterbury by Pope Gabriel the Great versus St. Bernard sent by Pope Honorius, which I just said, in lieu of King Cinewald and King Alfred the Great. Primary motives for establishing of the so-called Christianity. Primary motives for the Gregorian Mission was to reintroduce Roman Christianity to the Anglo-Saxon, but the one based upon the new mission by Pope Honorius on behalf of St. Bernardus being sent to King Alfred the Great and King Cinewald, it was to establish a religion and royal power seat for the what? The Kingdom of Wessex. Okay? The Kingdom of Wessex. Why the Old Minster was built? Why was it built? The Old Minster was established around 648 to 660 AD as a result of the Bernardus mission. Wessex was converted by St. Bernardus, a separate missionary authorized by Pope Honorius, completely independent of Augustine's earlier Kentish mission. Okay, very separately. Okay, royal consolidation. King Cinewald of Wessex commissioned the Stone Church, i.e. the Stone Age, we've been using stone since the Stone Age, to solidify Christian rule and provide a grand burial site for West Saxon royalty. Churches, mounds, monuments were used for burial purposes, okay? It became a full cathedral when Bishop Wine moved the regional bishopric there from Dorchester to Danes. We're talking about the Old Minsters, okay? A property that was preserved throughout continuity. It moved from Old Minsters to what they call New Minsters, which was like 100 yards, not some several yards, okay? Why the New Minster was actually built. The New Minster was built much later in 901. That's over 300 years later, okay? After the Gregorian Mission, okay? Centuries after the Gregorian Mission ended. Alfred the Great vision. King Alfred the Great bought land right next to the Old Minsters to build a royal Benedictine monastery. Hence the English Benedictine reform, which was done by our Jesus Christ, King Edgar the Peaceful, which I'm the reincarnation of in his modern day. They went off the Benedictine monastery going all the way back to Bede. What's his name? Saint Benedict of Nursia. Okay. You had Alfred the Great vision, then you had Edward the Elder's execution. His son Edward the Elder completed and fulfilled his father Alfred the Great, which is another son of Alfred the Great was Asherton. Parts of no. Asherton was the son of Edward the Elder, who was the son of Alfred the Great. So Asherton was the grandson of Alfred the Great. It says his son Alfred Edward the Elder completed it to fulfill his father's wishes and housed Alfred remains there. The two ministries stood so close together that the singing of the respective choir famously clashed against each other. All right. Both structures were eventually demolished by the Normans in the late 10th century to clear land for what is now called Winchester Cathedral. Okay? Winchester Cathedral. Before it became Winchester Cathedral, Old Minster and New Minster became what they call Hyde Abbey. Okay? It switched to Hyde Abbey when it moved from the location as a result of the conflict between Old Ministers and New Ministers based upon the clashing of the music, the singing, etc. All right? It says the Old Minster and New Minster were deeply connected, both physically and historically, despite operating as two complete separate institutions. Their connection is defined by an intense physical proximity, sharing the royal burial ground and a fierce institutional rivalry. Physical closeness. I'm giving you all the Jews. The two churches were built right next to each other in Winchester, separated by only what? A few yards, as I just stated. They shared the same cramped precinct in the lower parts of the city. They were so close that the singing of the two choirs frequently clashed and disrupted each other's services. The monks complained constantly about the lack of space and the overlapping sound. The royal burial ground. Both ministers served as the ultimate spiritual heart of the kingdom of Wessex and housed its royal dead. You hear that? Old Minster held the remains of earlier West Saxon kings and eventually became the shrine of St. Swithlum, making it a major pilgrimage site. New Minster is built specifically to house the tombs of King Alfred the Great, his wife Elizabeth, and his son King Edward the Elder. Are you of my father's house? Institutionalized rivalry. Because they occupied the same space, i.e., land, they compete. They competed fiercely for centuries over land, resource, prestige, and royal favor. The old Minster was a formal cathedral, the seat of a bishop, and they inherited that as a result of uh, the mission led by Bernius in lieu of the Pope Honorius mission to Wessex, which was southern England. Okay, they had cathedral. The new Minster was a prestigious royal monastery backed heavily by the West Saxon kings. Okay, so you had cathedrals versus royal monasteries. The royal monasteries were based upon celibate monks versus the cathedrals who were composed of married monks. Okay, and this is the whole purpose for the English Byzantine reform done by Ethelwald and King Edgar the Peaceful. Okay, shared destruction. Their final connection was their shared fate at the end of the final connection was their shared fate at the hands of the Normans after the conquest of 1066. There's a show that come on my TV. I have a it's called JTV. My man offers it, but it's a show that's from Europe. I think it's being it plays regularly, but I forgot the name of it. But it's a show about them living in the time era of the 12th century. Okay, and they mentioned King John. They mentioned Sheriff from Nottingham. Okay, and they got a Jamaican in the movie. Okay, in this play, but they're living in the filth, the land, the resources. They're living in mud hut houses and the whole nine. Okay, the next time I do a lesson, I'm gonna get the name of that show as well. Okay. It says, but buildings were torn down to make room for construction of the massive single Winchester Cathedral standing today. The new ministers moved. While the old minister was paved over, the community over the new minister was forced to move just outside the city walls in 1110 AD, renaming themselves as Hyde Abbey. Okay? Very, very important from the transition of old ministers to new ministers to what they call Hyde Abbey, which is from cathedrals to what we call monasteries. Okay? The macro connection, broad church history, the papal continuity. Pope Gregory I launched the original wave of conversion in 597 to Kent. Decades later, Pope Honorius commissioned St. Bernardus specifically to go to the parts of Britain where the Gregorian mission had never reached. Foundation of Western Christianity. Because Bernardus succeeded in converting West Saxons, he laid the religious groundwork for the kingdom of Wessex. It was this newly Christianized kingdom that eventually built the old ministers and the new ministers in 901 AD. Did you hear that? Why they are strictly separate. Let's see. 1. Different missionaries. The Gregorian mission was led by St. Augustine of Canterbury. The Wessex mission was led by Winchester churches, which was led by St. Bernardus. If I'm pronouncing this wrong, please forgive me. Different jurisdictions. Augustine mission was focused heavily on the southeast of Kent and Essex. Bernardus operated independently in South and West England, okay, of Wessex, okay. Massive time gap. By the time the old ministry was built, the last original members of the Gregorian mission had already died out. By the time the new ministry was built, the Gregorian mission was ancient history, nearly 300 years into the past. Okay? In short, the Gregorian mission converted a different part of England. The Winchester ministry were purely a local West Saxon world project born from a completely separate missionary campaign. So what is the difference? The core difference is that the Gregorian mission was a foreign papal expedition sent to convert a specific region, while the Winchester ministry were physical stone structures built decades later by a local monarchy. You hear that? A local monarchy. The Gregorian mission provided the initial spark for Christianity in Anglo-Saxon England, but the Winchester minister were the result of an entirely different political religious movement in different kingdoms. Okay? In a different kingdom. Here's a different direct breakdown of how they differ across key categories. Structural differences. Gregorian mission versus the old and new ministers, or what we call the Winchester ministers. What was it? In the Gregorian mission, an international evangelical campaign as a group of people. For the Winchesters, two distinct physical church buildings structured out of stone. Okay? Who started it? For the Gregorian mission, Pope Gregory the Great in Rome. And Winchester, West Saxon King Cynewulf and Alfred the Great. Geographic base. Canterbury, which was the Kingdom of Kent. For the Winchesters, the Kingdom of Wessex. Theological era. The very beginning of Anglo-Saxon Christianity was in 597 AD. The golden age of Anglo-Saxon role in monotheistic power was from 648 to 901 AD. You hear that? Do you hear that? Three main differences explained. A mission versus a monument. A mission versus a monument. The Gregorian mission was an event. It consisted of St. Augustine and 40 Italian monks traveling across Europe to preach the gospel to assumed pagans. Versus the Winchester ministers, which were nothing more than monuments. They were built generations later as permanent institutions to serve as road burial vaults, cathedrals, monasteries, seats, and political statements of a fully Christian kingdom. Do you see the difference? 2. The Kingdom of Kent versus the Kingdom of Wessex. Anglo-Saxon England was divided into royal Bible kingdom. Now remember what Ray Ahmad said, that they were dark-skinned, okay? They didn't come up with that white stuff until the Naturalization Act of 1790. Linking it back to Caucasian by, what's his name, Blumenbach, but we see from case law, that's a loose, unscientific term. Excuse me. The ministers belonged to the kingdom of Wessex. Wessex rejected Kent's religious authority, choosing instead to establish its own independent church network in Winchester. So it rejected the authority under the religious creed as established in Kent by Augustine of Canterbury under the authority of Pope Gregory I. You see that? It was rejected. These are some Jews I'm giving y'all. I don't see where else you're going to get this information. Hold that thought. I think I'll make me a couple calls. Once again, like, share, subscribe to the Third Temple English Church of England. All right, you know the platform, as well as donate free and common tokens to $ Clifford Jefferson L, my cash app, $ Clifford Jefferson L. Send me some love. Okay, the Kingdom of Kent versus the Kingdom of Wessex. Anglo-Saxon England was divided into rival kingdoms. The Gregorian mission was invited into the Kingdom of Kent by King Ethelbert. The ministers that belonged to the Kingdom of Wessex. Wessex rejected Kent's religious authority, choosing instead to establish its own independent church network in Winchester. Did you hear that? Outside of what Bees already said about the English people, national identity goes back to the English church. And the English church goes back or is predated an anti-Nicene Creed, okay? Before the Nicene Creed was created, okay? Or the body of apostles that govern the Nicene Creed was created, all right? Because we were living at tribes at that particular time, and we had some unenumerated retained rights that came directly from our lords, okay? Going back into what we call time immemorial, okay? The minister belonged to the Kingdom of Wessex. Wessex rejected Kent's religious authority, choosing instead to establish his own independent church network in Winchester. Rome's direct authority versus royal authority. You hear that? Rome direct authority versus royal sovereignty. The Gregorian mission was tightly controlled by Rome. Pope Gregory wrote that the instructions chooses points out. Pope Gregory wrote that instructions choose the leaders and dictate how the church should run. The Winchester model. The The Winchester ministers were controlled by the Wessex kings. The kings funded them, appointed the abbots, and used them to legitimize their royal dynasties over southern England. Very, very important to understand the two different capacities of the Roman church and the English church. Okay, very important. Two different capacities, all involving the interest in Christianity. Okay. Both absolutely had to connect to Christianity. It was through a single driving force that drew them all. Let's see what that is. Every element discussed, the Gregorian missions, St. Baroness, and the two Winchester ministers existed for the sole purpose of spreading, practicing, and solidifying the Christian religion in England. Here's how each one was fundamentally bound to Christianity. What they were. They were not secular town halls or palaces. They were sacred Christian institutions. I repeat, they were not secular town halls or palaces. They were sacred Christian institutions. The old minister was a cathedral, the seat of the Christian bishop, and the new minister was a Benedictine monastery, a communal home for Christian monks. The royal connection. The kings of Wessex built them because they had converted to Christianity. In Anglo-Saxon England, a king's power was closely tied to the church. Building Grant Stone ministers was a way for a Christian king to show devotion, secure prayer for his soul, and claims that God bless his reign. You hear that? This is called the divine right of kings. Okay? The only secular element, i.e. political power. Let's see. While the core motive was Christian, religion and politics were completely intertwined. The king used these Christian buildings for political gain, to unite their people under one shared religion, to create a magnificent royal burial places that made their dynasty look holy and powerful, to use educated Christian monks to help run the government and write laws. Canonists. You hear me, brothers and sisters? These were your canonists. So while they are different historical events, they are 100% connected by the history of Christianity. Okay? The old ministers and new ministers were holy Christian institutions. They served as a spiritual and political heart of the kingdom of Wessex. They were not just buildings. They were major hubs for medieval Catholic churches. As a result of the influence that the Catholic Church put on, but some of the ways of the Catholic Church, as we see through the expression of the Westminsters and the ministers sent to Kent, they did not accept the Roman Catholic teaching. Instead, they accepted their own concept of Christianity. Okay, the direct connection of Christianity can be broken down into four main functions: center of worship or prayer. The old minister, i.e. cathedral, it was a cathedral, meaning it housed the cathedral, the throne, of the Christian bishops of Winchester. It was the administrative headquarters for spreading and managing Christianity across the region. Okay? New ministers, it was a monastery. It was a Benedictine monastery. It was populated by monks whose entire lives were dedicated to the Christian faith, strict daily prayer, and copying of the Holy Scriptures. Okay? 2. Royal burial vaults for Christian kings. In Anglo-Saxon England, kings believed that being buried inside a church close to the holy altar would help secure their salvation in the afterlife. The old ministers held the tombs of early converted West Saxon kings like King Singalith and King Sinwulf. The new minister was built specifically to hold the remains of King Alfred the Great, his wife Elthwith, and his son Edward the Elder. A deeply devout Christian king famous for translating Christian texts from Latin into English so his people could understand them. Okay? Very, very important. We can thank Bees for that. Okay? 3. Shrines for saints and miracles. And this is in fact a miracle for you who are listening to me. Both churches house the remains of holy Christian figures, making them major destinations for Christian pilgrimage. All right, we're going to scroll down a little bit further. Spreading literacy and Bible study. So in the Anglo-Saxon era, churches were the only schools. Did you hear that? Churches were the only schools. The monks and priests at both ministers were responsible for what? Teaching people how to read and write. You hear that? Creating beautifully illustrated Christian manuscripts, such as what we call the illuminated manuscripts, such as Bible, prayer books, and theological essays. Managing the kingdom's laws, which were heavily based on Christian morality and the Ten Commandments. Pretty much what King Alfred did in the Doom Book, okay? He copied the Ten Commandments in the Mosaic Code for his Christians, okay? Christianity of the Winchester ministers were politically independent, mixed with Celtic tradition and deeply nationalistic, whereas the Gregorian mission was strictly Roman, tightly controlled by the Pope, and culturally what? Foreign. While both practiced the same core Catholic faith, the way the religion was run, taught, and integrated into society differed drastically between the two eras. Evolution of Anglo-Saxon Christianity. Check it out. The table below contrasts the direct papal oversight of the early Kentish mission with the independent royal churches system of the Kingdom of Wessex. Let me go back. Okay. Direct papal authority versus royal control. Under authority under Rome and under the kings of Wessex. Direct papal control governed closely by instructions sent straight from the Pope in Rome. For the Wessex kings, governed by the kings of Wessex, who appointed their own bishops and abbots. Cultural blending, purely Roman, attempted to stamp out or completely overwrite local pagans and British traditions. Anglo-Saxon and Celtic mix, blended Roman practices with local English cultures and Irish Celtic monastic style. Language of the faith, strictly Latin for the Roman Catholic Church. Preaching and writing and scripture were kept in the universal language of Rome. Vernacular, Old English, shipped heavily into English, translating the Bible and prayer so common people could understand them, but the common people apparently don't. Okay? Primary goal, conversion, turning a completely pagan population into baptized Christians versus consolidation, using an already Christian population to build a unified English nation. You see the difference? See what I'm trying to do? This is just a repeat of what you just seen in the actual diagram. So we can move forward. The power of the English language. Y'all speak English, don't y'all? The Gregorian mission viewed Latin as the only acceptable language for a holy civilization. At the Winchester ministers, particularly the new ministers, Christianity became distinctively English. All right? Just like Bede said, he created BC. Dionysius created AD, and AD is a result of what we call the Constantine and the Nicene Council or the Nicene Creed in 325 AD. Okay? They don't go backwards. Okay, you need B's for that. But B's did that for who? The English people, which are clearly according to case law are dark skinned. Okay, swarthy looking. Okay. At Winchester ministers, particularly the new ministers, Christianity became distinctly English. Driven by King Alfred's educational reform, monks translated key Christian texts into native Anglo-Saxon tongue. They believed that a peasant hearing a sermon in English was far more valuable than a peasant hearing a mass in Latin they could not comprehend. Who this is heavy. Now let's look at the new minister's connection to Christianity and was completely transformed by the Benedictine Reform movement in the 10th century. Okay? See the chronological movement of Christianity by the Westminsters, i.e. the ministers, i.e. Wittenmont. Okay? Very, very, very important to see the transgression. Okay? The new minister's connection to Christianity was completely transformed into a Benedictine Reform movement of the 10th century. In fact, the old and new ministers became what? Ground zero, hence 1 BC to 1 AD. Zero was not counted by B's, okay? He skipped. Why? Because he took it from ground zero. Ground zero, according to B's, is from the English connection to the church, okay? Very important. The English connection to the English church and not the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? Very important because they're not looking backward. They're moving forward with theirs. All right? So as I said, in fact, not in belief, not in presumption, not in suggestion, the old and new ministers became the ground zero for this violent, dramatic religion revolution in England. The reform directly targeted the corrupt way Christianity was being practiced in Winchester and replaced it with strict holy rule. Here's how the Benedictine reform connected to and changed Winchester ministers. Okay, let's look at it because it's very important to find out your capacity and interest to that Benedictine reform. Okay, done by the Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed One, which is me in the modern day. Yes, the English Third Temple Church of England. The problem, decadent clergy. The same problem we have today. Most of y'all want to be members, but keep your secular ways. Okay? You want secular benefits. You want secular rights. All right? But that's not the capacity that declares that type of interest that you have in regards to these rights, going back to the ones who wrote the law. 1 second, hold that thought. So it said by the mid-1901, we know 1901 is when New Ministry was built, okay? The Christianity practiced at both the old and New Ministry had grown lax. They were not staffed by holy cloister monks, but by circular canon, priests who married and had families, owned property, private wealth, and property, did not live in the monasteries, treated their church job like profitable secular careers. Did you hear that? Were accused of skipping prayer, feasting, and hunting. Okay, very important. You must live the life. You must have the capacity. 2. The reform. The 964 AD forced eviction. Okay? Hear that? Forced eviction. In 964 AD, King Edgar the Peaceful. This is Jesus Christ, y'all. Pardon yourself. This is the Christ, not Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is the one for the Roman Catholic Church. For the Kings of Wessex, this is their Christ, okay? This is their Christ. All right, we can look at New Ministers Charter for that. Okay, New Ministers Charter. Let's pull it up. Right here. I can't make this up. How do I know all this? Randomly. New Ministers Charter. Look at this picture, y'all. Y'all better look at this picture. Who is that sitting in that office? Flanked by angels. It's not a natural person, because they're still looking for that natural person to come in the end times. Because the person at this particular time, based upon the Hebrew calendar and based upon Christianity, is a spook. Okay? No one has seen them. But yet there's another timeline existing at the same time that happens to deal with the Berber, who I say are in fact the Berber, the English people. Okay? Because we have a calendar to support this time era. This is King Edgar surrendered a charter in his hand. Okay? Charter. A charter is a deed. It's an instrument of capacity. Front piece of a New Minister's Charter. Edgar is flanked by the Virgin Mary and St. Peter's. Upon this rock I will build my church. He is offering the charter of what? Christ. The charter to Christ, who sits enthroned above, surrounded by 4 angels. He's talking about a capacity, a charter in lieu of the capacity to sit in that office as the messenger. The New Minister Charter is an Anglo-Saxon illuminated manuscript that was likely composed by Bishop Ethelwood and presented to the new ministers in Winchester by Edgar in 966 AD to commemorate the Benedictine Reform. I know what I'm talking about. English Benedictine Reform. Let's see, where is it at? So we got the New Minister's Charter. Now we're looking up the English Benedictine Reform, because this is why the charter was created in the first place. There you go. You see that same New Minister's Charter. Same charter right there. You can't make this up. The English Benedictine Reform, or Modernistic Reform of the English Church, is in the late 10th century was a religious and intellectual movement in the later Anglo-Saxon period. Okay? This is capacity. All right? It moved from, before it became the English Benedictine Reform, a monastery reform, it was called New Ministers and Old Ministers. Okay? All right? This is a result of what was done through the Gregorian mission. Okay? So we see the transition, the chronological timeline, okay, anchored in the Berber calendar, because at this time, the English renowned year don't start till 1066 with William the Conqueror, but nonetheless, the Berber calendar is still it's anchored in and started in 951 or 950, because you subtract 2026 from 2976, you come up with the year 950. Okay, very, very important. At this time, King Edgar just becomes king. He became king in 949. I'll prove it to you in a second. English Benedictine Reform, monastic reform of the English Church, and later the 10th century was a religious intellectual movement in the later Anglo-Saxon period. In the mid-10th century, almost all monasteries were staffed by secular clergy who were often married. The reformers sought to replace them with celibate contemplative monks following the rules of St. Benedict, which is a school of black monks. The movement was inspired by the continental monastic reform. This was a continental movement, not just local, but continental. And the leaders, figures such as Dunstan, Archbishop of Canterbury, Ethelwood, Bishop of Winchester, and Oswald, Archbishop of York. In the 7th and 8th century, monastic were Benedictine, but in the 9th century, learning and monasticism declined severely. Who started the change? Alfred the Great and his grandson, Aselton, deplored the decline and started to reverse it. The court of Aselton, the first king of the whole of England, was a cosmopolitan and future reformer such as Dunstan and Ethelwood learned from continental exponents of the Benedictine monasticism. The English movement became dominant, or at its height, i.e., the golden, it became superior under King Edgar in 959. Okay? 959 AD. If the anchoring date is 950 and 959, that would be that these are the missing years of Jesus Christ. Okay? It would be right here. Who supported the expulsion of secular clergy from monasteries and cathedral chapters and their replacement by monks. The reformers had close relations with what? The Crown of England. And if you know the history dealing with the crown or the capacity of the crown, it is a corporation. A corporation, a legal personage, a legal or persona ficta. Okay? You must understand how far back this goes. Reform. In 964 AD, forced eviction. 964, Edgar the Peaceful, along with Bishop Ethelwood, the leader of the Benedictine Reform, decided to do what? Clean house. Pretty much what I'm doing now. They marched into both old and new ministers with soldiers. They gave the priests an ultimatum. Either accept the strict Benedictine rule, give up your wives, your money, and your freedom, or get out. Because it don't belong to you. It belongs to God. Okay? It was never yours. Most refused, like you're refusing now. So the same thing happened in the time of Shosing is going to be the same thing happening this day and time. Okay? The secular priests were forcibly evicted and strict dedicated Benedictine monks from Abingdon were moved in to replace them. Okay? Why? Because they had the capacity, because legal property was protected by a corporation, because they had the legal capacity. Okay? You must understand that. Connection to the Gregorian mission, full circle. This is where the Benedictine Reform actually reconnected Winchester to the original spirit of what the Gregorian mission was supposed to be about. The original Gregorian mission of 597 consisted of Benedictine monks sent by Pope Gregory. Over the century, English monasticism had died out due to Viking raids and corruption. This goes into Harold Bluetooth, what's his name? Harold Godwinson. These were Danish Vikings, okay? Over the century, English monasticism had died out through Viking raids and corruption. By enforcing the Benedictine reform at the old and new ministers, Bishop Ethelwerd was consciously trying to revive the original Roman monasticism that Augustine had brought to England centuries earlier. We just put a new twist on it. Why? Because we were able to identify it based upon what Bede said through his timeline construction going back before Jesus Christ, okay? Or before Christ, or before any of the stuff that we're subject to ever happened, okay? Cultural explosion of the Winchester schools. Once the new ministers became reformed Benedictine monastery, it became the artistic and intellectual capital of England. The strict discipline of Benedictine rule required hours of silent labor, which the monks spent creating the famous Winchester School style of illuminated manuscripts, characterized by lavish gold leaf and intricate acanthus leaf borders. The year 1189 is strictly legal boundary for time immemorial. In English law, and it connects directly to the Winchester ministers because it marked the era when the Norman masters finalized the legal and physical erasure of the Anglo-Saxon church system. You hear that? By setting the legal limit of memory to September 3rd, 1189, the coronation of Richard I, son of Henry II, son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, ruler of Jerusalem, English law effectively categorized the entire history of the old and new ministers as happening before time began. Did you hear that? Before time began. This goes into your Hebrew calendar, 3761, because it only deals with cosmic, spiritual recording. Okay? And they didn't see themselves as men, secular men and women, okay, doing secular things. They thought themselves as spirituals, replications of spiritual entities based upon their acts, deeds, and mental thought or mental state of mind. Ministers as happening before time began, transforming their ancient royal privileges into an untouchable legal myth. Okay? Because really all this shit is a myth. Okay? What is time immemorial? In English common law, time immemorial means a time before legal history, specifically defined as any time, not prospectively, but retrospectively, meaning prior to September 3rd, 1189. Okay? 1189. Under the Statute of Westminster of 1275, if a right, property, custom, or land boundary had existed since at least 1189. This is why Bede's recording is so important, because he recorded everything that happened before AD. That meant that these interests and capacities before 1 AD, the Roman Catholic has no right to it, because everything they do is prospectively, going forward, not backwards. You don't have anything that existed retrospectively, okay? In lieu of what we call the time immemorial, the date set in lieu of any type of claim, in lieu of reversion or remandment of a state, without being subject to the statute of limitations, okay? Once a custom was proven to be this old, it can never be challenged, and even if no original written deed existed. That's very, very, very important, because now it brings on the legal capacity of the concept of time immemorial. Let's look at it. How the Winchester ministers connected to 1189. The legal ghost of the Anglo-Saxon Rite, or the corporatizing of the Anglo-Saxon Rite, or the incorporation of what? The Anglo-Saxon Rite, going back to the time immemorial, and even back before that, date establishing time immemorial, based upon what Bede stated, based upon his timeline anchoring in historical continuity and preservation of who we say we are as Burbage, going back to the Stone Age, okay? It's very, very, very important that we fit into that gap, okay? When the Normans conquered England in 1066, they spent the next century seizing Anglo-Saxon lands that belong not to a secular building, but a ecclesiastical building known as a church, okay? By the time 1189 arrived, the physical old and new ministers had already been demolished by the Norman Winchester Cathedral and High Abbey. The date 1189 serves as a legal curtain. Any ancient Anglo-Saxon land boundary or monastic privilege established by King Alfred or Bishop Ethelwald that survived up to 1189 became permanently locked into law as unchallengeable ancient custom. Did you hear that? How do we prove that? How do we prove that? Unbroken chain of title. This is called a corporate bell. You cannot pierce the corporate bell unless you have acted outside of the legal curtain. Okay? The legal curtain. It said the legal curtain. All right? Let's look at the legal curtain. Anything outside that legal curtain will be considered ultravirus. Okay? Overreach. Outside of your capacity. Right here. Right here. You can't get no better than what I'm giving you here. All right? Notwithstanding to no comments, no remarks, no questions, no donations, no referrals, nothing from the people. Nothing from you whatsoever. I've been doing this for a while now, but nothing. Even from the members, I've got nothing. But yet I'm showing you by way of restatements of the connection that we have to the timeline preserved by the concept of what we call time memorial, which is a legal boundary, a legal curtain, a shut-off point. Okay? Permanently locking the centuries of the history dealing with land rights that was established by monks, i.e. legal persons that originated from the Benedictine reform of the old and new ministers under the English reformation of the Benedictine monastery by King Edgar, our Jesus Christ, parts of our Christ, our anointed one, which I'm the reincarnation of today, and I'm not that Jesus Christ that you talk about. Matter of fact, let me just change my screen. You take your pick. Excuse me. Okay. Let me stop my screen for a minute. Take a good look at that picture, everyone. Take a good look. You write your books, set your timeline. Y'all see the picture, right? That's King Edgar. This is me. Let's block him out for a minute. Look at King Edgar and look at me. Seriously. We know these two are denoting to the what we call Berber calendar. All right, and we know it has to do with the what we call the calendar created by the dating by beads. Okay, very important to take that into consideration versus the dating done by Dionysius. All right, and Dionysius goes back to the calculating of Easter, and that goes all the way back to the Council of Constantine in 325 AD. Okay, but no one knows what this individual looked like. Okay, all right, no one can prove that he looked like this person over here on my left. Okay, I'm telling you the person looked like the person here on my right, which is me in the present day. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Not because I incarnated in the present day, only because of my capacity. Okay, because of my capacity and interest that he had, or this individual had when he was holding an office under the new minister charter. Okay, it's the capacity. Let's continue. Don't hate, appreciate. The legal boundary of time immemorial permanently locked the centuries of history, land rights, and Benedictine reforms of the old and new ministers into untouchable foundation of English property law, treated their Anglo-Saxon origin as an ancient era before legal memory. And we know legal memory starts in what time? 1189. Let's see what color these English Anglo-Saxons are again before we go on. What color are they? If you want to play the color skin game. Dark skinned. Okay? Dark skinned if you want to play the color game, and Anglo-Saxon if you want to play the genealogy game. Alright? If you want to play that game, we're not playing over here. If you're watching TikTok, you better stop. Because you was not going to get any sound information on TikTok. That's why I'm not going back on TikTok anymore. Alright? The clock is ticking. Okay? If the clock is ticking called TikTok, then what are you doing within that time based upon the clock is ticking? Okay? Are you wasting your time, or are you learning from the time spent on TikTok? You're not learning anything because you're not teaching anything. All you're doing is listening to them talk. Okay? It's like somebody blowing a pipe the piper. Okay? And you're being sucked in based upon what sounds good, and not realizing that it's not good. Okay? Look at all the artificial food we eat today. It looks good, but it tastes good, but it's not good for you. Okay? All right, if you had a cake and we know the ingredients it takes to make a cake and remove one of the elements of that cake, 9 times out of 10 is not going to taste like a cake. Okay? We're in a whole nother level with it now. Hell, nothing that we got has its original origin of what it uses to make it. Okay? Everything artificial now. Okay? So everything is out of whack. Okay? The only thing that's artificial is our history. Okay? Because artificial, we know, is called legal. Artificial entity is called a legal entity, okay, or a legal person. So the legal entity or the legal of a legal person denotes to capacity, and the capacity is reference to the interest running with the land known as property right. We ain't talking about houses, buildings, none of that shit ain't even here. We talking about land, okay? You must have an interest in the capacity going back at time immemorial. And if you go, they trace it back to time immemorial, especially if you come from the plantation house, there's nothing they can do about it. Why? Let's read what it says. The legal boundary of time immemorial permanently locked the centuries of the history of land rights and Benedictine reforms of old and new ministers, and who reformed it? King Edgar, our Christ, which I'm the reincarnation of, which is this person right here. Okay? And the reforms of the old and new ministers into a untouchable foundation of English property law, treating their Anglo-Saxon origin as an ancient era before legal memory began, which is 1189. New Jersey Revised Statute 16:1-28 preserves this capacity. Yes. New Jersey Revised Statute 16:1-28 preserves the corporate capacity and property rights of ancient religious societies that were originally chartered by the British Crown before the American Revolution. We know the British Crown is called the Crown of Great Britain, that unified the English and Scottish Crown together de factoly. Okay? This statute acted as a modern American equivalent to the English concept of what we call time immemorial. So time immemorial, passed by Edward Richard in lieu of Edward I, is linked to 16:1-28, which is what New Jersey did when they secularized our ancient law. Okay? Very important. How 16:1-28 connects to our discussion. The statute connects the legal evolution of church property from medieval England directly to modern American law through several key mechanisms. 1. Preventing legal erasure of ancient charters. Just as the English common law used the 1189 threshold to prevent Norman courts from seizing older Anglo-Saxon church land, New Jersey Revised Statute 16:1-28 explicitly states that the property held under the charge of Great Britain will automatically vest in newly created state corporations. This ensures that the collapse of the British rule in 1776 did not legally wipe out church rights to its historic land. Let's go back to legal person again. The doctrine has been attributed to Pope Innocent III, the third. Okay, and when you go back 4 popes as its predecessor, you come to Pope Innocent III, who declared that the English church should be free and should have their rights and liberties undiminished, unimpaired, and retained for generations to come. Okay? So this is why they created the persona ficta that was supposedly created from Rome. Okay? Which allowed monasteries to have legal existence that was apart from the monks, simply simplifying the difficulty and balancing the need for such groups for having infrastructure that the monk took vows of personal poverty, meaning they didn't own shit. Okay? They didn't own anything. All right? Very important. So this is what 16:1-28 did. And we might as well say the state acts like as the popes. Okay? 2. Removing doubts of continuity. You hear that? The statute addressed a problem very similar to the transition from old to new ministers to the post-conquest era. In Anglo-Saxon England, changes in ruling dynasty threatened church property, requiring new world confirmation. This acquired a legal fix, y'all. Not the common law, but a legal fix, a statutory fix, a statutory pipeline, or a statutory bridge. In New Jersey, the law explicitly resolved doubts that may arise whether such estates would descend and vest by confirming that no physical transfer or deed from the old British trustees is required, or prospectively from anybody else in the modern day. The capacity to hold the property is preserved uninterrupted, without repeal forever. Okay? That's why all these Episcopal, Anglican, Presbyterian church holding on the property by way of some charter they got from a British monarch is null and void. Many colonial churches in New Jersey, such as early Anglican Episcopal parishes, held land grants directly from the King of England. By saving these rights from repeal, the state of New Jersey recognized that a religious community institutional capacity can outlive the empire that originally authorized it. How we know we outlived the empire? Let's go to the very statute. Title 46. Certain tenures and holdings turn into free income mensokas. This means elotio land. The tenures, the honors, manors, lands, tenements, or of hereditaments of the estates of an inheritance at the common law. This is not the common law we're reading. That's case law. We're talking about common law held by either by the King of England or any other person or body politics corporate at any time before July 4th, 1795. You hear that? It says King of England. And this is not a common law. This is a statute that, based upon the plain language, talks about a King of England. Okay? In the year of our Lord. So where is your Lord at, brothers and sisters? Is he here? Are you waiting for him? He ain't got here yet. But I'm here. As it was in the beginning, shall be in the end. Summary of the legal chain of title. 597 to 901, Christianity introduced corporate property ownership to English kingdom ministers. Did you hear that? Pope Innocent IV. 1189, English law locks in ancient church boundaries under time immemorial. 1776, American Revolution breaks the link between church and British crown. Having it being, because it's separate church and state, so now it's the religious law, it doesn't fall under ecclesiastical or canon law. Now it's protected under secular law, which is what we call a modern day statute. Okay? Protects those same ancient colonial royal roots, titles, ensuring church ownership remains unbroken until the present day. How many can you do that? Who have done that? Yes, this is the conceptual and legal DNA. You hear that? I know you're not on my porch. A baby groundhog. Hold on. No, they did. That's the first time. That's the first. He came right up on the porch. Okay. So yes, the conceptual, legal DNA, not biological DNA, not spiritual DNA, but legal DNA, time immemorial. Yes, the conceptual and legal DNA of New Jersey by Statute 16:1-28 traces directly back to the English Benedictine Reform, though the modern statute itself is a product of 18th century American history. Did you hear that, y'all? This statute is a final evolution or revolution or what we call revelation, all right, of the legal chain that began within the 10th century Anglo-Saxon reformers. Reform. What does it mean, reform? To make like it was. Not change it, to reform it. Created the very concept of permanent independent church corporation to secure monolistic land. The direct lineage, i.e. legal lineage, connects to the following legal milestones. The Benedictine Reform Invention, the Corporate Sacred Trust. Before the Benedictine Reform, church property belonged personally to local lords, kings, or married priests. When a priest died, his children inherit the church property. If the children doesn't inherit, that means that the property is sheets back to the king. All right? This is what happened in your case. Bishop Ethelwood and King Edward changed this at the new ministers by instituting strict Benedictine rule. They declared that church property belongs strictly to the institution, the monastery corporation, not the individuals. You hear that? Linked to New Jersey law. This 10th century invention that a church is a perpetual legal entity whose assets cannot be broken up by individual death or political transition is exactly what New Jersey 61-28 protects. Y'all not hearing me? You are not hearing me. Two, the 1189 time immemorial lockdown. They locking shit down now as we speak. As English common law grew out of the Norman conquest, courts needed a way to protect these Benedictine corporate lands from being stolen by corrupt barons. By locking down pre-1189 customs as time immemorial, the English court ruled that an incorporated monastery held land since the old Saxon days, its title was unchallengeable. Okay? The royal charge of Great Britain. For the next several centuries, the English crown issued a formal royal charter to churches based on this exact common law tradition. When British colonists founded parishes in New Jersey like the historic St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Burlington or Trinity Church in Newark, the king granted them charters that legally mirrored the old English monastic corporation. The American Revolution in New Jersey revised statute 60:1-28 mimics this, or what we call mirrors this. When the colonists declared independence in 1776, they lost their capacity. A massive legal crisis emerged. If the King of England no longer ruled America, then what happened to the king's property? Okay? Did the church charter he signed become null and void? No, they did not. To prevent greedy developers or the state from seizing historic church land, New Jersey passed a law, this is the legislator, originally enacted in 1786 and 1789, now preserved under 61-28. The statute specifically stated that all property held under British royal charters automatically shifted over to the new American state-recognized church trustees. You hear that? Martin versus Waddell. Let's go a little further here. The chain of custody goes all the way back because English common law relies on continuous line of precedence, meaning a legal concept invented in 964 AD was never canceled. It was simply adapted, carried across the Atlantic Ocean, and written into New Jersey state law. You hear that, y'all? In law, this is called the doctrine of corporate continuity and the chain of title. You hear that? The doctrine of corporate continuity, or what we call religious autonomy doctrine. It's called the religious autonomy doctrine. How many of you heard of that? Step by step, how a 10th century rule became modern New Jersey law. Step 1. The monk event the legal person in 964 AD. Before the Benedictine reform, if a Viking king or local warlord killed a bishop, the church land went back to the warlord. Bishop Ethelwood changed this by creating a legal shield called the monastic corporation. Under Benedictine rule, the land belonged to the office of the church, not to the human being holding it. You hear that? When a monk died, the land stayed within the church. The institution became a perpetual legal entity that could never die. Step 2. Norman adapted the rule into common law. 1189. When the French-speaking Norman conquered England, they did not throw away this Saxon concept. Instead, they standardized it. They ruled that if a church could prove it held land before 1189, the right existed from time immemorial. This meant the king's court would protect the church corporation, i.e. the crown, property forever, creating the foundation of English property law. Step 2. British Empire exports the laws to New Jersey 1664 to 1786. We're going to go right to the damn statute. When the British world colonized New Jersey, they brought their entire legal system with them. The King of England issued royal charters to George Carteret and John Berkeley. The same charters issued to those who hold the church under charters granted to the St. Mary's and whatever church they mentioned. All right, very, very important. Going back to 1664, these charters used the exact same legal language descended from the Benedictine Reform, making the colonial church an independent permanent property holding corporation under British law. Step 4. The American Revolutionary created a crisis in 1776. When New Jersey declared independence from the king, it created a massive legal loophole. If the king was signed the church charters and gone, does the church corporation still exist? If the corporation died, secular neighbors could legally steal the church land, cemeteries, and buildings, property, i.e. private property, etc. Step 5. New Jersey saves the chain of title with 16-1-28. To stop this from happening, New Jersey legislature passed the ancestor of those ancient laws into New Jersey Revised Statute 16:1-28. Law explicitly states that we do not care that the king is gone. The corporate capacity created by those British charters is preserved exactly as it was. It legally glued the broken chain back together. The property rights created under the old English system automatically step across the revolutionary boundaries into the American legal system. And with that, let me change my screen. All right. You see, chains broken by the enumerated laws that were passed down by our ancestors. This is the New Jersey Revised Statute book right there that you see right there. And it's for us, the interest that we have in our capacity as true citizens subject of what we now call America through the legal DNA and that blood DNA. All right? And I'll close out on this. The legal DNA today, because this is an unbroken chain of title, if you go to an historic colonial church in New Jersey today, its rights to own its land does not come from a modern real estate deed. So whatever you got filed on the county recorder office does not show capacity to own it. It shows interest to possess it. It legally traces it back to 16-1-28 through the British World Charters, past the 1189 time memorial line, straight back to the 964 reform by King Edgar Al Christ. Okay? So monks created a legal person, yes. The medieval church created the modern concept of legal person. While ancient Rome had early forms of corporate groups, the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages transformed this into the exact legal tool we use today. Okay? We use today. The problem. Human dies and castles falls. In the Middle Ages, everything was personal. If a landowner died, his land was divided, fought over, or taken back by the king, means mistreatment. This created a massive problem for the church, not secular world, not the government, not the states, but the church. Monks died, but monasteries needed to last forever. If a bishop died who legally owned the cathedral, if a corrupt abbot took over, i.e. father, he could sell the monastery land to personal profit. This is called subfeudation, which was prohibited by King Edward the third statutory law called De Donis Conditionibus and Queen Imperatoris. Okay? This is why they invented the persona ficta, the fiction at law, to solve this massive land problem in regards to the capacity to inherit it. To solve this massive problem, the medieval church lawyers, i.e. canons, invented a legal trick. They separated the office from the human being holding it. Okay? In 1200s, Pope Innocent IV, all right, when you go 4 popes, predecessors before him, you come to Pope Innocent III, who declared the English church to be free. All right? So this is due the legal creation of the term or Latin term personifica, a fictional person. The church view that a monastery or a diocese was an invisible, immortal body. Here come your angels. It can do what? Hold property. It can sue people in court. It can be sued by others. It can never sin, go to hell, or die. You hear that? Did you hear that? The jump from monks to modern mega corporations. When the Protestant Reformation and the Industrial Revolution arrived, merchants and government realized this church tool was a perfect for business. You hear that? For secularizing. They took the legal person invented by the monks and applied it to trade. Instead of a monastery, this is where the Sesquiquay trust should come from that you see on TikTok talking about everybody got a trust. That's bull crap. They took the legal person invented by monks and applied it to trade. Instead of a monastery that lives forever to pray, they created the joint stock company and later the modern corporation that live forever to make profit. Okay? Different capacity because you got different interests. Now, these modern corporations known today as Walmart, Apple, Google, which we're on today, buys property or enters a contract. They are using the exact legal machinery invented by medieval monks to protect their monastery property. If you are interested, we can look closer to how Pope Innocent. No, we don't look no further because we already know where it stemmed from. Okay? So in closing, this is part one, brothers and sisters. In closing, understand how important, let's see, it is to understand where you geographically are located at today. Okay, very important because you are in fact within the English Empire within the continent of North America. Okay? What that say there, y'all? What that say? This is like one of the best lessons I ever did. A new map of the English Empire in America. Virginia, New York, Maryland, New Jersey, Carolina, New England, Pennsylvania, Newfoundland, New France, etc. Okay? But yet, there is Great Britain, right? There's Great Britain. You got the eastern part of what we call the European continent, as well as Africa. It shows France, Spain, Portugal, Britain, Scotland, Ireland. But yet, the English Empire is in the continent of America. How can that be? It was I who brought this information to you. So it is I who deserves the capacity and the interest that is preserved by these said trustees known as your state, which does not exist. It is a legal person, okay? And they're not monks, okay? So they're not your father. And with that, I'll do part two. If not tonight, it will be tomorrow. But I really want y'all to seriously think about what it is that we talked about today. All right? Very, very, very important lesson that I spoke here today. Once again, I do this at my own time, on my own will. So all those who are going to be watching this video moving forward, okay, in lieu of understanding our past, okay, you can't move forward till you understand where you come from, okay. Please assist me in, restoring our story, not renewing our story, but restoring our story. Okay, pay your suffrage, free and common sockets, and your patronage to the Third Temple English Church of England, as well as donate your free and common sockets to your king under my Cash App, $ Clifford Jefferson L. Like I said, I have court proceedings. I'm in the appellate court right now working on behalf of you. Okay? So the least you can do is assist your king in preserving my capacity in lieu of what it is that we have an interest to do. And I call all of you to take on this burden as well. But for that, you must understand your story. Because as I say again, who writes your books, set your timeline. And time never was when the English people was not, according to BC. With that, I greeted you, as I always greeted you, in the love of our Christ, the Messiah, King Edgar, the Peaceable. Peace.